advise when we're live on COT?
You're already live on COT. I've already checked. We're live right now.
All right, thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay, we're off to the races. Okay, welcome to the Blueprint Board meeting, April the 15th, tax day, 1 p.m. I'm going to do a quick roll call just to make sure everybody is on the line before I get started. So I'll run down city first. Mr. Mayor, John Daly.
Yes, sir. I'm here.
All right. Commissioner Bryant.
I'm here.
Commissioner Matlow. Commissioner Matlow.
I'm here.
You got us? Was that a here? Okay, all right. Commissioner Richardson.
Present.
Commissioner Williams-Cox.
Present.
Commissioner Williams-Cox.
Present.
All right, okay. I'm going to count myself here. Commissioner Proctor.
Here.
Commissioner Jackson.
Right here.
Commissioner Minor.
I'm here.
Commissioner Dozier.
I'm here.
Commissioner Lindley.
Yes, sir.
And Commissioner Maddox.
Here.
All right, all present and accounted for. From a logistics standpoint, let me see if I can explain the way we're going to do this. Everybody will mute themselves if you don't mind. If you would like to speak, unmute yourself or hit the hand raising thing on your thing. I understand that will kick you up here, and I will start trying to keep a list of people that want to speak. If it's okay, so that we don't trip all over each other, if you could wait until I at least address you, and I'll try and build some type of order. Last night, we had I had the ability to see who had put their hand up first. It's going to be a little more rudimentary today, so please bear with me. My understanding is when you hit the hand raise thing, you pop up on my screen. And in that case, if I haven't gotten you in line, I'll try and call out, here's the next 2 or 3 speaking. Physically raise your hand, and I'll do a double take and try to add you to it. So, and with that, that's the logistics. Then I'll hand it off to you.
Yeah, just a little bit. Thank you to City T&I for offering up their conference room. That's where we're coming to you live from here. It's got good connectivity to WCOT, so hopefully we'll be able to avoid some of the sound issues before. For those that are in this room, we're all 6 feet apart, but I will note that the camera and the microphone is up on the screen, so we'll try and project towards you. Okay, so a couple of further housekeeping notes. This is a special meeting via WebEx being conducted in accordance with the executive orders of the governor. Public comments for this IA board meeting were submitted by email to comments@blueprintia.org up until 9 a.m. this morning to allow for adequate time for you, the commissioners, to review comments submitted. Those were emailed to you shortly after 9 a.m. Any comments submitted after 9 a.m. and up to the start of the meeting will be accepted and included into the official record of the meeting. I do note that there are 2 places on the agenda that was published for citizens to be heard and citizens to be heard on non-agenda items. However, as occurred at the last meeting and because of the WebEx format, that will not occur during this meeting. So I wanted to highlight that. Similarly, and I guess Mr. Chairman, we're in agenda modifications now. A couple of things. The economic update informational presentation item will actually be handled during staff presentation for item number 2. And when you get to the consent portion, I do have a brief correction to read into the record before you vote. Apart from that, we have 3 items and look forward to reporting about what we've achieved since 3 weeks' time, where the economy's at, and a lot of information. So turn it back to you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Thanks, Ben. So if we're taking the economic update, putting it into your section.
Item number 2.
Okay.
Yeah.
And we're not doing citizens to be heard.
No, sir.
So by my record, we would go straight to consent.
Yes, sir.
So I would entertain, oh, you got a correction, okay.
Mr. Chairman, if it, Commissioners, your consent agenda rather consists of one item. It's item number 1, the minutes from your last special meeting. I have one modification. Thank you, Commissioner Minor, for noting it. On page 4 of the minutes, the sentence that starts, Commissioner Minor noted that, should read, Commissioner Minor noted that 2,000 local nonprofits account for an overall economic impact of $3 billion a year, and therefore he was interested in seeing the CEDAR program adapted to make nonprofits eligible, end quote. All other components of the minutes are proper, we believe. So that would be the one modification for your minutes and your consent agenda.
So I would entertain a motion to accept consent with the corrections.
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
I have a motion from Commissioner Richardson, I believe.
Yes.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, is that Commissioner Lindley?
Commissioner Bryant.
Is that who?
Brian,
Oh,
Commissioner
I'm sorry,
Brian.
Commissioner Brian. Thank you. It's hard for me to keep up. Okay, so that's consent. So let me just say something real quick before we get too far too. And I don't want to turn this into a big war and peace, but you guys at OEB have really, really stepped up. And I want to just personally say, for anybody in local government to have created a program within 7 days, to have approved it, and then have administered it and basically awarded $1 million in a 10-day window, 17 days from start to finish by my calendar, is warp speed for government. And I got to tell you, you guys ought to be proud. It's not everything to everybody, and there were some rough edges because we had a learning curve, but frankly, you guys, I know because I was talking to you most of the time during that, just about around the clock. So my hat's off to you for being creative, being innovative, and basically busting your butt. Thank you. So it's a job well done. So, all right. Thank you, though. General business, I'll hand it back to you, Ben.
Okay, so consent passed.
Yeah, consent, yeah. Wait, no, we got to take a vote, I guess, don't we?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, votes. Can I just ask, all in favor of consent as presented, signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposition? Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Okay, we've got 2 items under general business. Honestly, item number 2 is going to get into the meat of much that we have to report on. And I think item number 3 will go pretty quickly, but we are going to talk a little bit about the CEDAR grant, the COVID and CEDAR grant, of course, meaning COVID-19 economic relief program. In item number 2. I know that it's a lot of information, commissioners, and I know that you've gotten both in your respective recent meetings, City Commission, County Commission, even just yesterday, the County Commission, a lot of information about where the economy is, about all the funding coming down from the federal level. I know that there's a lot of this material that's in your agenda. So we're going to try and keep the presentation here brief, but we do want to hit some of the highlights from agenda item number 2 between Christina and I. Just to kick it off, this item does a number of things. It provides you a report on where the economy is. It provides you a report on what the federal government has done, and there's been tremendous activity since the last special meeting of the IA board. There's been a lot of activity at the state level, and there's been a lot of activity at the local level as well, including the CEDAR grant. We're going to have a full report out on the CEDAR grant, an analysis, which Christina will cover, of how that grant has actually served a significant amount of small businesses, ranging from all different sectors, really, of the economy and the impact that it's had. You'll hear more information about what we can do today to actually expend a few more dollars for those that submitted their application before the deadline for the applications passed. And we've identified funding that we're recommending to you in option 1 to actually be able to process and approve those grants. Additionally, you'll remember at the last IA meeting, there was a request made for additional analysis for the hospitality industry. And so we're going to give you a presentation on that. There was a discussion at the last IA meeting without a motion, and then there was a motion made at a city commission meeting for there to be actual analysis performed for our nonprofit sector. That is included in this item. And then we're going to get into, of course, the CEDAR grant and how that is a platform, and then it's going to build down toward options. And I'll cover some of that after Christina speaks to you now. But Christina's got a lot of the great information, including really how the federal government has leaned into this, the state government, how we've been a convener and a conduit and an ombudsman locally with other local partners, and how the CEDAR program worked. And then I'll close it out and we'll return it back to you, Mr. Chairman. But to kick us off on the economy, happy to turn it over to our director and also share thanks from the chairman to Christina and her team for their work the past 3 weeks. Christina.
Commissioners, the economy across the nation is experiencing the full effects of the COVID-19 pandemic. As the federal, state, and local governments continue to react to this evolving crisis, we've compiled an initial high-level look at the economy, highlighting our major indicators. At the very high level, you'll find more information on your agenda packets on pages 3 and 4. Bottom line is we're seeing an uptick in unemployment numbers and a downtick in our sales tax revenue, not only just here locally, but across the state. I heard recently on the way in today that the retail sales are at their lowest month ever in March since they started tracking the details for that over the past 30 years. As of the week ending March 27th, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, there were 228,000 initial claims for unemployment insurance in Florida. This is triple the initial claims made the week prior. We're also estimating an initial 3% decline in fiscal year 2020 sales tax revenue. Our staff will continue to monitor these major indicators at the local, state, and national levels and update this information to you at your May workshop. We're anticipating to be more information released in the coming weeks, and we'll be able to provide that to you at your May workshop. As we discussed at our May 25th meeting, it's important to remember that the federal government is the only entity with resources sufficient enough to implement a comprehensive financial assistance to our businesses. Where a sudden stop in the economy creates a temporary financial crisis or prompts a longer recession, it creates an economic emergency for those hardest hit for small businesses and hourly employees facing those urgent needs. Only the federal government can bear the resources required to significantly migrate this scale of potential small businesses closure and substantial resulting unemployment. Since your last IA meeting, over $1 trillion has become available through new federal and state programs for small businesses and nonprofits. A chart with the program's funding levels, eligible entities, and websites can be found on page 17 of your item. In the essence of time today, I'm going to highlight just a few of these federal and state programs for you today. We are in constant communication with our regional liaison with the U.S. Small Business Administration, and we're anticipating local lenders will process hundreds of millions of dollars of loan requests from the Payroll Protection Program on behalf of Tallahassee and Lehigh County businesses. Today, we have been notified that across the U.S., over 1 million loan applications have been approved and processed by 4,660 lenders, which total $247 billion. In the state of Florida, over 52,000 Paycheck Protection Program loans have been approved for companies, which totals over $12.5 billion. This information is available as of April 13th. The average loan size across the country is $240,000. At a local level, one lending institution has approved $65 million in loans and issued $11.7 million, with a projection of $15 million by the end of the day. Another lending institution that services the Southeast, including the Tallahassee area, is reporting funding 3,000 applications totaling north of $1 billion across their service area. Earlier this week, the state of Florida announced the closure of the Emergency Bridge Loan Program that is administered by DEO and the Florida Small Business Development Network. Of the $49 million available, $6.1 million was loaned out to 414 businesses in our area, and that represents about 13% of the available loan dollars. At this time, we have not heard if the governor intends to add additional funding to this program. Enterprise Florida also manages a microfinance guarantee program. This is to stimulate credit for entrepreneurs and small businesses by targeting loan guarantees to lenders. And this is another program that we're promoting in cooperation with them. In regards to unemployment, I know that you're receiving phone calls and requests for our assistance, as is our office. At this time, DEO is working through a large volume of claims. And as a result, their staff and websites have been overwhelmed. In response, DEO is hiring additional staff to assist with unemployment claims, including 2,000 state employees who have been redirected to support them. The governor issued an executive order directing DEO to use third-party providers to improve their online and digital framework for applications, and they've developed an app as well as released a paper application process. CareerSource Florida offices will also be assisting DEO in processing applications for unemployment. Earlier this year at our previous meetings, IA meetings, I talked to you about our growing partnership with Florida Makes in establishing a regional manufacturing association. We're still working with them to help support our local manufacturers, especially regarding supply chain needs. To that end, Florida Makes, the Associated Industries of Florida, and Space Florida recently announced Connects Florida, a supply chain database tool for manufacturing industry in Florida. The purpose of this tool is to help Florida manufacturers better connect with each other to be discovered and increase business opportunities. We're promoting this new tool to our local manufacturers and reaching out to them directly to ensure that they are made aware of it. We are also working with several companies here locally to share their innovative adaptations to respond to COVID-19 needs, from Corey Bio with hand sanitizer to those making face masks and face shields, to connecting cocoa with local restaurants to add homes to go with takeout orders, and the sausage stimulus. We're sharing these innovative stories in our newsletter and on social media, and we're still receiving requests to be added to the Open for Takeout map, which has received over 35,000 visits. We're also working with local restaurants and a local app development company to discuss best how to amplify and market this mapping resource throughout the spring and summer months. Today, we're issuing a survey to our businesses that are on the Open for Takeout map to continue to assess how we can build off this and enhance offerings and streamline them for local restaurants as well as their customers. We've also partnered with SwellCoin to promote their For the Love of Tallahassee Small Business, a website that showcases over 103 local businesses and ways to safely support them. We're working with the Chamber to promote their Jobs Now initiative, as well as CareerSource Capital Region on those businesses who are hiring and looking for talent. There are several companies out here who are hiring across our region, and it's important that we help build those connections. Commissioners, the bottom line is that OED has remained active in working with the local business community and our partners during the COVID-19 pandemic. We're helping local businesses navigate the challenging regulatory landscape and also helping them identify resources and support for their business during this challenging time. We have become a primary conduit for businesses and important information, assisted hundreds of businesses with questions relating to support, application assistance, marketing awareness, as well as providing information on all the resources available. We are also working with our local partners, and I'd like to thank many of them, especially the Tallahassee Chamber, Capital City Chamber, Big Bend Minority Chamber, and the FAMU SBDC for their partnership. and support that they have provided our local small businesses. Our first priority throughout all this is to support our local businesses right here in Tallahassee. I'm also pleased to provide you with an update on the COVID-19 Economic Disaster Recovery Grant. Within 12 days of activation, we received over 700 applications, awarded 489 businesses, which employ 4,483 people with the grants. We truly appreciate everybody's collaboration and support from the PLACE team who provided grant reviewers to the city for helping us process the payments, and all of our partners in helping us promote this and get the word out for this grant. The majority of these businesses assisted have between 1 to 10 employees, with the top assisted industries being hospitality. This includes restaurants, bars, hotels, and entertainment, personal and professional services. A full breakdown of these awards by industry can be found on page 19 of the agenda item. We're continuing to process payments to these businesses, and we'll provide, and the complete status report is found in agenda item number 3, which we'll discuss later in today's meeting. Of note, commissioners, you are aware that the grant application was closed at 5 p.m. on April 6th. The grant review team continued to review and analyze these applications that were received prior to the closure of the application process, but after the $1 million budget was reached. Staff determined that 71 eligible applications, which total $124,500, were received and processed during this period. Please note that this is a slight increase in what is in your agenda item, as additional grants were determined eligible after the publication of this agenda program. So those new numbers are 71, which is up from 58 businesses, and the amounts that could be awarded to those businesses is $124,500. Staff is recommending that the IA board consider realigning funds to fund these eligible businesses, and that is what you see in your option number 1. Commissioners, under your leadership and quick, decisive action, Tallahassee and Leon County was the first community in Florida to create a local grant program of this type to support small businesses in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. Several communities across the state of Florida have reached out to us for requests for how we did this and how we found the funding to do it. This program successfully built a much-needed bridge to the bridge, providing immediate but limited financial assistance to local small businesses in an expedited manner, and providing much needed relief to those businesses before any state and federal funds could be issued. This grant was developed and deployed with the full knowledge that the federal government would be constituted a full economic stimulus and help these businesses get the bridge to the bridge. With that, I turn it over to Mr. Pingree to walk through the remaining sections of the agenda item.
I know there's a lot of information there. I'm going to turn it back before I get into mine, which will be a little bit shorter. I do just want to highlight a couple of things that Christina said. Number 1, I'd point you to the table that's on page 15. You've received a lot of information, including some new information here today about all the state and federal programs that are available. I would note to you that this business resource guide, which is an attachment to your material, and available on oevforbusiness.org, is updated continuously to make sure that those in the community, whether they be citizens, business owners, anyone, knows all of the various resources that are there. I am pleased to report that we take that role as a convener very seriously. Christina's sitting on so many different entities, task forces, and otherwise. I know there's been recent conversation I'd like to highlight, and thank you for it, about how we can continue to lean in and assist, and know that we do. Please do know that we do. OEV assists businesses with whatever their needs are, whether there are grants or grants that we're aware of. We absolutely are a connector. Know also that as we move hopefully quickly through this emergency period, and as the national, state, and local conversation turns to a reopening, know that Christina and her OED team, your OED team, is at the heart of that, communicating with our state partners, our regional partners, and our local partners as that comes closer to fruition. We're, you know, those conversations are just beginning. We're certainly still in the mix of it, but I wanted to emphasize those points here briefly, and I'll get into one last thing before I turn it back. Please do note that option number 1, we would recommend when you get to that point of this discussion that it reflect the updated numbers Christina identified. So,
I'm muted. Is that what it is?
I'm sorry?
Somebody's muted, yes.
That's the city attorney is trying to get logged in. She did not get the invitation, so I forwarded to her. So that's her trying to get on. So Cassandra, mute your mic.
Okay. So just to reiterate, when we get to that point of discussion, note that we actually identified more businesses that came in under the application deadline, but beyond what was allocated, and your staff recommendation is to pay for those. I know I have a few minor segments of my own before a larger conversation, but I want to turn it back to you, Mr. Chairman.
Couple quick housekeeping things. How's the sound? Can you guys hear okay? Thumbs up, good. Everybody okay? All right, there was one question, Christina, that was, so the money's been allocated, the money's been awarded, money has actually started to flow, so that it's actually hitting people's accounts.
Yes.
In most of the different tranches that you described.
Correct. The federal and state.
Okay, all right, so that was a question. And then Mary Ann, I got word that you had a question. Is that the question you had? Yes, she says yes. Okay, anybody else have a question for Christina so far?
Can you not see? I thought we were raising our hand over in the little thing there.
I can only see 5 or 6 of you, so I can't see everybody. So
Okay, well, my hand is up. Also, I have a question. I wanted to read some clarification.
go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. The clarification. First of all, great job, guys. You've done, as has already been said, you've done a fantastic job of getting these much needed funds on the street. I want to be clear that once you hit the $1 million mark, there was.
The City of Tallahassee is the capital of the state of Florida. It is situated among the rolling hills of northwest Florida, located close to the northeast corner of the Gulf of Mexico, in a region known as the Big Bend. Tallahassee is graced by southern characteristics, gracious hospitality, and lush topography. Not only is Tallahassee known for housing the state's top executive offices, but it's also recognized for its marketable natural resources, including beautiful lakes, canopied roads, and diverse wildlife. Tallahassee is the ideal place for a mixture of the hustle and bustle of city life and the quietness and serenity of country life. To learn more about the capital city, visit talgov.com.
I'm taking care of that, Ian. I'm taking care of that. I apologize.
There are a number of outstanding educational institutions in Tallahassee, including Florida Agricultural and Mechanical University, Florida State University, and Tallahassee Community College. These institutes for higher learning and others located in the area are committed to the success of their students. They also provide a myriad of education and entertainment opportunities for local residents. Star Metro is the city's award-winning mass transit system. If you're tired of fighting traffic, or if it's been a while since you have ridden Star Metro, give it a try. Star Metro provides regular fixed-route bus service.
Hey, Marcus. Bingo.
Okay.
We got it. Thank you.
Commissioner Williams-Cox.
You need to unmute your line again, Commissioner Williams-Cox.
Okay, thank you. I wanted to make sure for clarity that everyone who applied for this assistance who was eligible and had been accepted will now receive the funding that has been identified to fulfill those requests.
Yes, Commissioner, we're requesting the additional 71 eligible applicants in option 1 to be approved so that they can receive the funding. Those applications came in after we hit the $1 million mark, but before the 5 o'clock deadline.
Okay, just want to be sure that, and I would move acceptance of that recommendation so that we can continue to move forward and help those small businesses as well.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second for your report, right?
For option 1.
Option 1.
The 71 eligible businesses.
Okay, we have a motion and a second.
Hey, Brian.
Go through discussion on that before we get into you.
For that, I think we're good. Most of mine would be on that.
Okay. Yeah, I'll go ahead and entertain discussion then on that then now. Commissioner Minor, did I hear you?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I had a question, just general about the report. Just real quick, OEB, again, Christina, thank you for such a great job. You guys are doing great work on this. And thank you also for the update on lending institutions and the federal loans that they've been extending to local businesses. That's very helpful. My question, actually, I had this from last night as I was reviewing the materials again, but do we have the ability to get some official numbers for the county on the federal programs that our small businesses and nonprofits are applying for? That'd be really helpful to get at the county level, because then we can compare that with other counties to see how we're doing, relatively speaking. I suspect that with your help, with OEB's assistance to these businesses and nonprofits, we're doing really well in terms of our local organizations applying for these loans and getting them. But if there are some programs where we might be behind the curve on other counties, we could then use that information as a means to investigate why maybe some of our businesses and nonprofits are not applying at the same rate as other counties, and then make changes in our approach to make sure that we're doing a commensurate amount of assistance for that specific program. You know what I'm saying? So if there's a way for us to get those types of federal metrics at the county level, that can be really helpful for us to make any diagnostics to make sure that we improve upon what we're already doing. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Commissioner Minor. Commissioner Bryant, I saw you had your hand up. Unmute your mic.
Got it. Thank you.
I'm sorry, Commissioner Bryant, that was a question for Christina. Are those metrics available? Are we able to get that at the official DEO and federal level?
Well, the information that we have right now, especially on the PPP, is based on the national and state level. We were able to get some individual information from local lending institutions. There isn't a mechanism that the SBA has right now, but we're continuing to work with that to receive that. When you look at the state bridge loan, having 13% of those available dollars come into our community is a large percentage, considering that Tallahassee, Leon County encompasses less than 1% of the state businesses as a whole. So we have a standing grant evaluation or loan evaluation committee that is run by the FAMU SBDC, and the quick activation of that, the first 2 awards statewide came in here locally. That quick activation really allowed us and put us in the position to be able to leverage that $6.1 million.
Thank you. I guess to boil my question down, do you get the sense from SBA that there may be some type of county level provision of those metrics to help us measure ourselves relative to other counties in the state?
As of right now, those aren't available, but we're hoping through our continued working relationship with them that we can identify that. And we'll be sure to let you know in May if we're able to receive that information or prior.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Commissioner Bryant, for your patience.
No problem. My question is really in line with you, Commissioner Minor. And my question further stretches that very the essence of what is coming into our community under the federal programs as we look forward and think about what our nonprofits need as well as for-profits in the future. We need to understand what has come in to whom such that we can make informed decisions. So in the report, I think on page 2, there were 9 banks identified that are connected with the Paycheck Protection Loan Program. And question are those the only banks that have been partnered with our community, or are there others that are forthcoming?
Those are the SBA affiliated banks that provide SBA loans.
In our community, right?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll follow up a little bit later on that, but let me also, this has nothing to do with the motion, but it does have something to do with the presentation. Let us ensure as we move forward that, and I think I mentioned this the first time around, that minority communities have opportunity to not only understand from a listing what's available in terms of assistance provided to them to complete these applications, but that we actually go the extra mile to ensure that they have one-on-one assistance and that we inform them what is available in our community such that they can receive assistance. Otherwise, even though I've gone through the resource guide and I find it very helpful, there will be many people in our community who will not go online and read the resource guide. So I think it's incumbent upon us as we move forward to ensure that we have other mediums of sharing this information. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, I've got Commissioner Maddox, followed by Commissioner Richardson. Commissioner Maddox.
Chair, I want to speak to our grant program that we just completed. I requested some documents and did some analysis, and what I came to find was that there were no MBEs at the 5,000 level and about 2 MBEs at the $2,500 level. You know, I'm wondering if staff can answer the question of what were the inhibitors to MBEs being able to achieve that $5,000 and $2,500 level of granting that businesses were applying for. And quite frankly, I mean, I don't know that there's an answer that will satisfy me as much as maybe if we are looking at doing other things moving forward as far as stimulus is concerned, or as far as a bridge is concerned, or having small businesses is concerned, that we really look into this and figure out what was the inhibitor and how can we go about making it a little more equitable in the future. I think we had I think you guys told us 400 businesses, and of those 400, I mean, I know at least 50 were at the $2,500 level, and I think, like I said, only about 2 were minority businesses. Now, I do know that there were a lot of women-owned businesses that were in the number of businesses that were funded, but I was disappointed to see there wasn't as many minority-owned businesses. So, could someone speak to just what were the inhibitors at those top levels and what we can do to, I guess, make it a little more equitable moving forward?
Commissioner, we did miss one MBE on here that did receive it at the $5,000 level, and that was Burley's Kitchen. They were one of our first ones to get awarded. And that was due to direct outreach by our MWSBE staff. We picked up the phone, contacted Burley's Kitchen, made them aware of this grant process, and they were one of the first ones at the $5,000 level. Our staff also directly reached out to all of our certified MWSBs through phone calls and emails to let them know not only about the CEDAR grant opportunity, but also about other resources that they may not be aware of at the state and federal level at the time. And we'll continue to do that throughout the course of the response for the COVID-19 pandemic.
No, Mr. Chair, on point.
Yes.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I just wanted to make a point. Yeah.
I'll finish after Commissioner Williams-Cox. I'll finish after her point.
Okay. Good observation, Commissioner Maddox, and good response. But I want to point out that there are some other community partners who were working with us at the ground level who helped us to get the some of the other MBE who may not have been included. As you recall at the last meeting, Commissioner Bryant and Commissioner Richardson want to make sure we use all avenues. And I know OEV used every avenue available, but there were some other community partners on the ground who also helped to get some of those folks in the pipeline. I know this because beauticians and barbers and those kinds of businesses, they didn't have the time to go look and figure out how to do these applications. So they, community partners helped them to do their application, not only for the city grant, but also for the SBA as well. So there are some other folks who in our community who were helping to make sure that we had good representation.
All right, Commissioner Maddox, you still have the floor. Thank you, Commissioner Williams-Cox.
Thank you, Commissioner Williams-Cox, and I appreciate those organizations doing what they did to try to help us out there and getting the word out. And Christine, I thank you for that correction with earlies. I did see it earlier on, but that's still only one at that $5,000 level. I'm just looking to see if we do something further, if we do something in the future, how can we? And maybe this is, of course, it's not a discussion that we're going to be able to have today and come to some conclusion. But if we do something further, how do we make sure that we have more MBEs in that $5,000 and $2,500 level that are deserving of those level of funds? So that's just a observation I had and a question, and something I'm interested in us doing moving forward. I do believe Commissioner Williams-Cox, when we had this initial conversation before we approved it, focused a lot on that. And so I just want to make sure that we don't, now that we have some data looking at how we funded moving forward, that we don't let that part of the conversation slide to the wayside. It's something that's very important to our businesses here in Young County. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Ben, you want to?
Yeah, I just want to really emphasize this because it's an important point and it's one that we pay very, very close attention to. Starting the morning after your last IA meeting, our MWSBE team, our city county team, that is a key division of OEV, made personal one-on-one phone calls with every single business that is a certified MWSBE, offered help, detailed the program, and sought to encourage their utilization. I just don't want to hold that back because it really was a focal point for it. We acknowledge, and Deputy Director Jones, he was in this small room, would tell you, there are a limited number that are certified with more than 25 employees. But in terms of making sure that those who receive the grant are reflective of our community, including through business ownership, was absolutely a priority of this office. And by my eye, the report of who received the dollars seemed very diverse accordingly. But know that it is an absolute objective. Was for this grant, would be moving forward as well. Thank you.
Okay, I've got Commissioner Richardson, followed by the mayor, then Commissioner Dozier, then Commissioner Lindley. Commissioner Richardson.
Mr. Chairman, I first want to also commend the staff for the work they've done up to this point. It was a Herculean task, and you all certainly rose to the occasion. And I think that all of our small businesses that we've been able to help in that regard benefited, and the ones that I've talked to have expressed their appreciation for what we were able to do for them. I think that we, Commissioner Maddox, have done a tremendous job in making sure that our minority businesses have been involved. I know that both of the local minority chambers, as well as the Tallahassee Chamber, made that a priority during this process. And I guess the question would be, how many of our certified minority businesses do have the requisite number of employees to make them eligible? So, and I think Ben addressed that to some extent. The question that I had, and this would be more because it's certainly in our backup material, but would be for those from the public that are maybe following online or will watch it on WCOT. The 71 businesses that we are considering here today, what is the total amount that will be allocated to those businesses And where will that additional funding come from?
Commissioner, the total amount is $124,500. That's up from the original $105 that's in your agenda item. We're recommending that.
Yeah, and I'm assuming, well, I would like clarification from the motion maker that this is your intent, but we have it that $111,504 would come from the Business Recruitment and Incentive, or BRIF fund. 7,000 would come from line 11, the Urban Vitality Job Creating Pilot Program, and I'm on the table on page 24. And 6,000 would come from line 18, Business and Workforce Engagement Events. Again, this is working within the current fiscal year to satisfy payment for those 71 qualifying companies that just came in after the money ran out.
Thank you, Ben and Christina. That answers my question.
Thank you, Commissioner Richardson. I've got Mayor Daley, followed by Commissioner Dozier, followed by Commissioner Lindley.
Mr. Chairman, it's good to see everybody. And, I said it before the meeting started. Let me say it again. Y'all had a great county commission meeting last night and took some significant action both on CHSP and the curfew, and congratulations. Y'all did some really good work yesterday. Love working with y'all. Ben, you and your team did a tremendous job. Congratulations. I mean, literally, you took an idea from concept and within 24 hours, put it into a plan and implemented it. And as a result, you are correct. And you mentioned this earlier, that you have other communities all across the state of Florida that are looking at us as the model. And we are setting the example of taking care of business locally. You did a great job. Really do appreciate it. And by the way, Ben, I appreciate all your time over the past 24 hours, digging through all of this information and working with us on some ideas and all that good stuff. I definitely support the motion on the table. I want to throw out, not in the form of a motion, but just to get everybody's feedback. I think that we've done a great job reaching out and making people aware of this situation. I do know that even somebody who a week ago thought, well, I don't want to apply for it because of the fact that I've got to apply for state or federal assistance, might have changed their mind in a week with everything that's going on. Not many, but I've heard from one or two businesses that did not even know about the program, have applied for state or federal, which technically they would qualify for our program too, and would be interested. But the fact of the matter is that the window has closed. And so I'm interested in hearing from my colleagues. For instance, I was talking to an owner of a gas station here in Tallahassee just today with 2 employees that's applying for federal assistance that would have loved to apply for this, but for whatever reason, wasn't aware of the program. So I definitely support the motion on the table to move forward with the businesses that were in the process, but we ran out of the money. Yes, I think that's great. But I'm interested in hearing from my colleagues about maybe extending another week, maybe putting just a little bit more money in the CEDAR, and maybe doing one more quick, hey, do you know about this program if you are applying for the federal or the state assistance? That this is available, and then bringing this to a hard stop. I think we all realize that this cannot go on forever and ever. It is a defined program, but I also share the concerns that have been mentioned earlier about making sure those that would qualify that might not have known about them, because we've all got so much going on in this time frame, have the opportunity to apply. And I don't think it'll be a large amount, but we still might have a handful of businesses that would qualify. For whatever reason, they did not know about it, or maybe have changed their mind within a week since putting it together. So I put that out there on the table as well. Ben, I also asked, you did a tremendous job with me yesterday. When the time is appropriate, because I sense that we're going to have other discussions about nonprofits and individual assistance, you have done a yeoman's job identifying some funding sources within the budget. And so when appropriate, I just ask that you walk everybody through what your thought process is with those funding sources. And that's all I have, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've got Commissioner Dozier followed by Commissioner Lindley. Commissioner Dozier. Commissioner Dozier.
I'm getting there, Mr. Chair. Different system from yesterday. I gotcha.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so I don't want to repeat all of the great comments that were made before, but I will echo them and just say, fantastic job to stand this program up in such a short amount of time, and to have the resources and the staff to do that is just exceptional. I appreciate the discussion about the minority and women businesses, and I'm glad for kind of the context of the outreach. I'm not surprised by that, but thank you for filling out that answer. I'm going to kind of conclude a couple of questions with some funding issues that maybe the mayor was just talking about, something similar, but I wanted to circle back for a second. Christina, you ran through the details about loans from local banks or regional banks pretty quickly. They sounded really good. This may be in line with some of the other questions about the data, understanding that we may not have statewide numbers or local numbers as a whole for another month or more. But if we could get a breakdown, just kind of a snapshot of what's happening with local banks, I think that would be really helpful. Is that possible?
Yes, we can certainly make outreach on that to get that report.
Okay. Thank you. And as we're all navigating these things, am I right to think that the banks who qualify to give paycheck protection loans are different than banks that are qualified to do SBA loans, or are those the same banks?
The same banks.
They are the same banks. Okay. So I noticed something in the news this morning about all banks in Florida now being qualified to give the loans. I know there were some challenges with certain banks only, I think you said this before, only giving loans to those people that they had previous relationship with, right? So ongoing, the list that we have in our agenda has now been expanded. Is that right?
We are recommending to our businesses that reach out to us that they first contact their local lender who they bank with to see if the program is eligible through them. And then if not, if they're not taking advantage of that, then provide them with that list of banks. And yes, they are continuing to expand that and making changes to the program as we move forward.
And we're updating our records on the business resource.
Absolutely, yes. So we anticipate another update to be later today.
Okay, great. So related to all that, I noted the marketing plan in the item. You mentioned working with Visions, First Right and Zimmerman, and bringing that back in May. Kind of in line with some of the other comments about outreach to lots of different people in the community. Everyone gets their information from different resources, although I am seeing OEV pop up absolutely everywhere. So good, well done for that. Have we looked at trying to do PSAs with the TV stations or anything like that that might get to a broader audience? Is that part of your marketing plan, or could you talk about that a little bit?
Absolutely, that is part of our marketing plan. In fact, we're having those discussions this week about leveraging those PSAs.
So do we need to give you any direction now? I know you were going to bring us an update on that plan in May, but do you need any direction at this meeting to allow you the flexibility to move forward with some of those pieces? Because the quicker we can get to a wider market, if you will, on promoting these programs, the better.
Yes, as long as it falls within our spending levels and matches with our current marketing plan, we can proceed forward and on those.
And you don't see any problems with that needing any other approval today? Okay. I just wanted to make sure you had as much flexibility as possible. I agree with the comments that came earlier about challenges, connecting with some folks in the community, and that may not be based on income level. That just may be based on where they get their information. So I like what you're doing there. So thank you. The other question, I guess, Mayor, you just suggested that we might come back to nonprofits. It feels like this is kind of overlapping to me. So if we're going to focus on just the small business piece and the motion that's on the table right now, Mr. Chair, I'd like to come back to some questions about nonprofits in a little while. Is that what you're thinking?
Well, I think Ben is going to address the nonprofit section after we finish. My take would be, Commissioner Dozier, let's dispose of this motion, Ben can tee up what he's got, and then we can probably open that door.
That was my question. I was just clarifying that. So the last thing that I wanted to mention on this is that there have been questions about, I think, again, the mayor just said, and maybe others had it as well, that some people may not have wanted to take out a loan from the state. And yeah, some may think they need it now when they didn't need it a couple of weeks ago. But I actually heard another concern in the last couple weeks, which was some businesses, and this is more regional than Leon County, but businesses who were impacted by Michael got a bridge loan from the state while they applied for federal. When they were finally awarded a federal disaster loan, it didn't cover the original loan from the state, that bridge loan, and they were left with a debt. And whether it is that issue, that there may be some fear based on what they will eventually receive from the federal government and whether or not that covers the state debt or other, or if they simply don't need to take out debt, that they just need $1,500 to get through another month and they think they can make it work. I just wanted to add that to the conversation because I think we need to be sensitive to those concerns, and we don't want to encourage businesses to take on more debt than they actually need. So I think it was more than appropriate to encourage people to apply for these programs. But as we move forward, if we do any other type of program outside of this 100,000 plus, I would like to see a little more flexibility if a business can say, we just simply don't want to or need to take on that extra debt. Christina, have you heard anything about the Michael FEMA grants? I saw you nodding there.
We do know that if you have not paid off your SBDC bridge loan from Hurricane Michael or another previous disaster, you're not eligible to apply for another loan. That's at the state level from that piece. So we have to talk to one or two businesses.
So that's another issue that's compounding it, right? I didn't realize you weren't eligible for a second. That makes sense. But these were people that weren't even applying this time around because they got bit the last time around with, yeah, so, okay.
That didn't preclude your eligibility though for like the PPP program, which we did also take as a group of reaching out for those bridge to bridge.
Good point. Thank you for that clarification. All right. Thank you all very much. Great job. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
All right. Okay. Next up, I've got Commissioner Lindley, followed by Commissioner Matlow. Commissioner Lindley.
Thank you very much. I can't say enough to the staff either. You all were fantastic in getting so much done, so much more than we ever expected. I do really empathize with the comments made about the minority businesses. And Commissioner Maddox, I'm assuming the size of companies that was required to get the $5,000 loan figures in a lot, which leads to one of my comments that it's just hindsight, and I don't know if there's a way we can address it, but there's so many businesses that are just single proprietor, lawn services, hair salons, and different in the home businesses, the handyman businesses that weren't eligible to apply, but they are ongoing businesses, have been around a long time. And I regretted, kind of afterwards that we were requiring one employee in addition to the individual person, because I think that actually would probably reach minority businesses in some cases where there was a single proprietor of a business. So I don't know if there's a way. I like the mayor's thought of extending this another time, another week or a certain period of time if possible. But I really felt like that would have been an area we could have maybe emphasized more, is the single proprietor, and maybe there's a way to get into that some other way. So that's something I'd be interested in hearing about.
or discussion from the others too. I know it's not exactly on point of this particular agenda item, but the other thing I was interested in is your marketing approach. And I think all of us who are on this board know from just campaigning, and I certainly know from being in a media business forever, that there's so many different ways to reach different markets. And so I'm really happy to hear you're thinking about PSAs, not only on television, but on radio. Radio stations all reach different audiences. And PSAs on that, I think, would be really significant. And billboards also reach certain markets. So I'm not trying to tell you all in marketing how to do your business, but it's an area I know quite a bit about from my past. So do you need more money allocated for marketing? Because really just general marketing on radio, TV, and billboards and stuff will help a lot amplify the work you've done on social media and on our websites. So I would be interested in, just let us know. Commissioner Dozier asked about, do you have sufficient funds for marketing? I think you might have said yes, but I wonder, is it a broad enough base of marketing efforts? So those are my two interests. I really am interested in trying to get more minority businesses into this. I mean, that's really critical for all of us. And I mean, it hits us in all of our aspirational goals in every grant or every contract we issue practically. But I think the marketing to certain segments of the community through different radio, TV, whatever, would be really helpful in that way too. And I did want to give Diane, Commissioner Williams-Cox, a salute. I see she has a call-in show coming up, I think on Thursday, to help promote interest in different opportunities available in the minority community. Am I right, Commissioner Williams-Cox?
Yes, we're going to have a discussion about the coronavirus and the minority community.
Tomorrow? Is it Thursday or?
Tomorrow at 4 p.m. Conference call. Thank you.
There's a PSA for you.
Thank you. and Mr. Chair, since she asked me a question, I responded to her, so I'm unmuted. I wanted to speak to what her first point. We made sure that the sole proprietors were included in this. And the opportunity to apply. So the qualification was 1 to 10 in the first group. That included those who were sole proprietors, because we knew the beauticians and the barbers needed to be included in it, and they did apply.
But
and were rewarded.
Some of them didn't, because I think they hadn't applied for federal funds or that sort of thing too. I felt like the single proprietors were left out, just from people I heard from who felt that they weren't eligible. So I heard from 3 different folks who were, so somehow the message was confusing, or they didn't get it, that they were able to apply for that. So maybe the staff could speak to that?
Ben or Christine, you want to address that?
We did count that as 1 employee when we were doing our brand.
Well, what problems were they having then? Was it maybe that they hadn't, because
the emergency bridge loan did not count, the state's emergency bridge loan did not count sole proprietors. The SBA's program for economic disaster injury, as well as the PPP, does cover sole proprietors.
So it would have been the bridge loan that they were not able to.
Yeah, just to piggyback, the only anticipated issue I could perceive is if they only were willing to apply to that one program. Amongst the programs that were given to them as options as a prerequisite to qualify for the CEDAR grant. If they only wanted to apply to the one that required 2 or more, then that would have been problematic. But it is correct to say one person shops absolutely could qualify and did participate.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Well, I think just some confusion there from people I was talking to about it, or maybe they just didn't have the full picture on it. But I just want to emphasize, because that's really an important arena. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Lindley. And I'll say I had probably half a dozen people in that exact situation, sole proprietors that went in and said, well, one employee, and I thought the first thing, I hooked them up with Christina by text, and almost in every case, I got a thanks so much a day or 2 later after they got in. So, considering you guys took a week to build this, I think we met a lot of needs. Anyway, so I've got Commissioner Matlow followed by Commissioner Jackson. Commissioner Matlow.
Mr. Chair. First off, my thanks to staff. I think we were the first government to actually get cash into the hands of businesses that need it. That's a great accomplishment. And to be able to serve nearly 500 businesses while we watch the state only be able to reach about 1,000 really speaks highly of us, maybe a little bit poorly of the state's response. And I think they may need to step it up a little bit. To Mary Ann's point, I think there was some confusion with businesses based on what they had to apply for and what kind of response they needed. I heard from businesses that were waiting for some sort of acceptance letter or confirmation that they didn't receive. So they held off on applying immediately for the local funds because they thought they didn't have their paperwork in order. So if it does get reopened, I do think there are some people who are just left in the fringe who knew about the program, wanted to apply, but just got caught up on one thing or another. I will support if we want to do another round of something moving forward. I do think we should look at how we can specifically help minority businesses. There's also businesses who bear a larger burden. A lot of businesses are able to operate at some level, but many are down 50, 75, or 90 to 100% of revenue because they're no longer an essential business and can't stay open in any capacity based on influence. So those are the things I think we should look at moving forward. If we're going to go further, is who got impacted the most? How can we target people who got impacted the most and really bring some relief that way? Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Commissioner Matlow. I've got Commissioner Jackson, followed by Commissioner Maddox, Commissioner Dozier, and then Commissioner Bryant. Commissioner Jackson.
Yeah, just a quick clarification. Thank you so much. Awesome work, and the speed with which it happened is kind of unheard of in any sort of government, much less local government that cares about small businesses in this way. Just one thing I'm trying to understand: if you were to open to the 71, which I think adds an additional 13 requests, then that would change the criteria because you're saying that the Florida loans, the bridge loans have closed. Is that correct, Christina?
Commissioner, these would be for those businesses that put in an application prior to 5 p.m. on April 6th. So meaning they were eligible and met all the criteria in our grants, but after we hit the $1 billion mark. So they would have they're already in our, been reviewed by our grant team and deemed eligible. And if we had the additional funding, would have been granted that business.
Okay, that's all I have. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner Jackson. I've got Commissioner Maddox, Commissioner Dozier, followed by Commissioner Bryant. Commissioner Maddox.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll be brief. So there's three things that I like for if we're going to consider doing anything further, and it may be premature to say, but once we get to that conversation, if we get to that conversation, there's three things that I think I would like for the staff to bring back for us to consider. I think a lot of the things that got in the way were more, I don't know if we want to call it policy, but more administrative parts of the application and requirements that kind of held some businesses back. So the first thing is the lowering of the employee threshold. I think they got in the way of that $5,000 to $500 level for minority businesses. I don't know how we can figure that out, but that's something if staff can be creative and giving us options on that, that'd be great. The other thing is I heard from some businesses that they weren't current on the utility, and that kind of got in the way too. I don't know if there's some kind of way we can look at maybe that piece or that requirement of the utility piece in there, maybe taking that out or looking at modifying that. That would be great too. And finally, for sole proprietors, I would imagine that a big barrier there would be the SunBiz registration. A lot of sole proprietors don't have to go through that process. So. And I believe you have to have that registration in order to be eligible for these grants. And so if we looked at that, I think that would bring more sole proprietors to the table for us. And so I think staff did an amazing job putting this together so soon and so fast and getting about 500 grants out there, businesses in need But I think as we move forward, now that we have all the data, we can be more intentional about about what we're going to do and making sure that we get that money out. And don't get me wrong, I'm not at all trying to relay the fact or say that staff didn't do everything they could to engage minority businesses. As a matter of fact, I've articulated on 2 or 3 occasions since we've been on this on this conference call that you did go over and beyond to make sure that minority businesses were contacted and did have opportunity. But there may be some policy things there that we as a board need to consider to make it a little more accessible for those businesses that are in need. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Commissioner, thank you, Commissioner. I've got Commissioner Dozier followed by Commissioner Bryant. Commissioner Dozier.
Mr. Chair, I just simply did not lower my hand there. I think I was in the queue from last time.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Commissioner Bryant, did you want to speak again?
Yes, sir. Just very quickly. I think I brought up the whole idea about the utility piece when we had our first meeting. And I just really want to commend, because I called probably several times when people reached out to me about they didn't have a utility bill. And staff did an outstanding job on a case-by-case basis, I was told, actually responding to whatever the need was. No one called me back, so that might be a good indication that they got what they needed through that process. And I think we need to continue to do that. And the last thing is on the marketing strategy, and you probably already have this included, but the Cumulus radio station, 95.3, because people actually do listen to the radio probably, maybe even in some cases more than they're reading. So I think whatever avenue we can to reach out to radio stations would be great. And if you're already doing that, just let me know. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Great. Thank you, Commissioner. All right. I have a motion and I have a second, as was articulated with the detail for the additional funds that we talked about earlier. All in favor? Do we have anybody else in the queue? Okay. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 All right. Any opposition? Okay. Motion carries unanimously. 12-0. Okay.
Okay.
Back to you, Ben. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. And wasn't, I don't know if we had intended to bring it up in that form or fashion, but I think that worked out pretty well. And thank you for that. So that's 71 more businesses that will receive their award application letters here shortly. All right, so at the last IA meeting, there was specific direction to look at the restaurant service industry and see that analysis. And commissioners, I'm picking up on page 19 of your agenda material. I'm just going to sort of walk you through to what might be next if you want to take any further action, show you the analysis that we did on your behalf. So there was a desire to understand better the restaurant and service industry, what it was comprised of, the estimated number of employees, and some of the challenges that were experienced. So the agenda materials walks you through that. It actually does get down to NAICS codes. And as you may imagine, I'm just paraphrasing, we held a series of conference calls with different stakeholders, both from the restaurant industry, from bar or nightlife industry and others. And as you would anticipate, they're being hit immensely hard at this point in time. I mean, effectively, in some cases, being mandated to be shut down during the emergency order. So it's not a question of threshold. Most are reporting to us through those vehicles or through those avenues that they're beyond 90%. I mean, some will just say it's 100% during this time in terms of the negative impact of this. So at the same time, when I speak of restaurants and service, I do want to highlight, as Christina had indicated, many did take advantage of the CEDAR grant that you just acted on. So that is a group of constituents, of business constituents, if you will, that were able to participate in your prior policy action in your grant. So discussed at the last IA meeting, but not directed, but then separately formally directed at a city commission meeting was a clarification that we also want to see and or consider to be service the nonprofit sector. We want additional information to come back for that segment. So on page 20, you see that addition, and you can see clearly how strong a subdivision of our economy they are. You can see the employment numbers and the impact that they have. Now, this is a category, unlike restaurants and bars, these were prohibited from applying or they could apply, but they were not going to qualify for the first CEDAR grant. But you see additional information here. As you continue, and I'm going to get into the legal in a minute, what you do not see is a draft proposal for either. We're going to get there in my presentation here, but I think it's really the CEDAR grant program, that platform. If you wish to do anything further, that's the platform to narrowly tailor from if there's something different or unique that you want to do. In other words, put in simple English, we were able to put it forward very quickly. It was very easy to apply to. Staff is able to give assistance to it. It was easy to understand, easy to process, and we had success in actually working with the clerk's office in processing those payments. So if there was something more that you would want to do, that might be a logical jumping off point. Just continuing with the analysis, I would like to highlight, and I won't get into too much detail, I know it's right there before you, but there was a consideration at the last IA meeting. Okay, is there the flexibility of the IA board to expend money for economic development purposes or grants from the blueprint infrastructure side? And there was a lot of discussion there. The only thing I would highlight, you see the legal opinion that was performed. It informs what's before you today. I would just highlight the top of page 23. And in that, when we reviewed the emergency order of the governor, there is some flexibility that you have to reallocate approved projects from fiscal year 20 for your Blueprint 2020 program. And you'll see analysis in your material there. Not from the 2000 program, but yes, from the Blueprint 2020, and I'll cover that in a moment. All right, so given that legal opinion and that parameter, we presented you in the next following 2 or 3 pages a look at your budget, a word on the budget. Like everything else you've heard from the city and county, we are in the process now working with city and county budget offices of seeing what the negative impact to the revenues are. And we are still in the early stages of that. That being acknowledged, and as is presented in your material, we know that there's going to be a negative impact within the current fiscal year. We know also that we're preparing for your May meeting to give you those policy options and solutions for a mid-year budget adjustment. That being acknowledged, we also appreciate, as you want more information and may consider taking additional action today, you can't wait until the end of May to get this information. So these pages really just set the stage for you in terms of what we believe today is going to be the shortfall that we have to correct within the current fiscal year, and our initial thoughts on how that might play out. And so I'm going to speak very high level and direct to the bottom line of what you have today. You have a section starting on page 23 that covers the OEB budget. And you have a table on page 24 that covers the OEB budget. Commissioners, given the action you just took, and given our anticipated shortfall in revenues, we estimate bottom line, there's a total available project balance. At bottom line, there's just over $200,000 within the current OEB budget that could be reallocated from other approved projects within the current fiscal year. That if you wish to do more, and this is beyond the motion you just approved, that there would be some funds there. On page 25, and acknowledging the legal analysis that was performed, that would provide for this. There is analysis on your Blueprint 2020 Infrastructure Capital Improvement Program. And what your staff did is we went through that, acknowledging and presenting to you at this point in time the estimated shortfall we believe will exist that we'll deal with later in the late May budget workshop. But it also identifies some existing projects on Table 1, page 26, that have not been initiated thus far and could be considered by you if you so desire to do something additional here. Again, all of this is just presented to you in accordance with your request for additional information. And as background as any further action you may take, if you choose to take it, you would be able to identify where you would like to reallocate those funds from. So in conclusion, already through the action you've already taken, CEDAR program has been a great success. And it was a platform that was quickly enacted to be that bridge to the bridge. And certainly with your action here today, it's been well received and somewhat renowned by other communities across the state of Florida. You've asked for additional information on nonprofits and the restaurant industry. That's been provided. And you've asked for where budget flexibility may exist, and that's been provided. At this point in time, Commissioners, Mr. Chairman, we're happy to answer any questions that you may have. And thank you very much.
Okay, I've got Commissioner Dozier on deck, followed by Commissioner Bryant. Commissioner Dozier.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ben, I was trying to follow where you're going with the different numbers and looking at the tables. It matches some of what I had in my notes. But in conclusion there, did you just say that there was 200,000 available unallocated?
Not unallocated.
Not unallocated, I'm sorry, in program funds that could be reallocated.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and could you point me to which table was that coming from, or that was just a kind of bringing together a number of those different?
Yes, ma'am. If you look on page 24 of your agenda material, there's a table, takes up the whole page.
I've got that, yeah.
Available project balance at the very bottom. It's a little bit lower than 228,431 because we tapped a little bit more funds in the motion you just approved to be able to pick up those additional businesses. But you've got just north of $200,000 that could be reallocated.
Okay.
Okay.
Trying to wrap my mind around this, and this was the table that I've been looking at, questioning some of these other funds. So I'm going to ask you a couple questions, even though you may have just said this. I just want to make sure I'm looking at this correctly, okay? So program dollars that had not yet been spent, does that include the remaining $25,000 for workforce development, for example?
Yes, I believe so, in the available budget. And let me just, if it's helpful for all commissioners, and there's narrative on page 23, but this is factoring in that we anticipate a $1.18 million shortfall within the OED budget that must be dealt with. And we target that at your May budget workshop. But that's also reflected in this table. But to answer your question, Commissioner, the answer is yes.
Okay. So when I was working through some of those numbers, I picked one randomly, workforce, because I wanted to make sure I was kind of thinking about this correctly. I had come to similar numbers, but I also had two other questions. The unallocated funds, the $550,000, that is not included in this amount, obviously. could you just remind us what that is dedicated for? I'm sure we talked about it at our March meeting.
That was the unallocated fund balance that we were going to bring the policy back to you for consideration on future leveraging opportunities.
Okay. Thank you, Christina. I thought it was within that that scope of future projects or programs.
And that also included the competitive projects policies too that you asked at our workshop for us to do.
Okay. So I like the starting place with a couple $100,000. I like the idea of doing something more right now. I am going to be very nervous about touching any infrastructure dollars. I really appreciate our council's analysis of Blueprint 2000 and Blueprint 2020 funds. So thank you for that. That was really helpful and interesting that the executive order were to allow us to use 2020 infrastructure dollars. If we got to do that, we can have that discussion. But if we can get there through other path, I think that would be better for us. Again, as you all have rightly said, there's going to be a substantial shortfall, probably more than the 13%, I would guess, that you note in the item. And we need some ability to restart the economy, and construction jobs, infrastructure jobs are very good. So I reached out to Kevin Graham with FSU, had a series of conversations for a few days after the agenda came out last week. My understanding is, I'm going to guess, a majority of the board doesn't want to touch the convention center project. We had a long discussion about that in March. We think it's a good long-term goal for us. My question for Kevin, though, was, given where FSU is right now, do they need $500,000 for a convention center study allocated in FY20? Kevin thought likely they would not need that much. I had asked the county administrator a question about this, and I understand that amount may be reduced based on revenues, just like anything else. But Kevin was open to a conversation with staff about how much we need to keep the convention center moving in the next few months until October. And because they don't want to lose that momentum. But if there were a remainder, say if it was 200, 300,000 that did not need to be spent before October, he said he was open to a conversation about that money being allocated towards emergency funds in FY20 and shifting the cost for the convention center study to FY21. Ben and Christina, does that scenario make sense to you? Do you have any concerns about that? About at least having a conversation with FSU?
No, Commissioner, and I'm happy to report to the board that we communicate in accordance with your policy direction with Kevin and his team pretty constantly, including during this time of emergency and teleworking. Also had a number of conversations with him in advance of this meeting. We are, as you would anticipate, working on the MOU as per directed. I do agree that there is likely going to be some time by the time we get the MOU done, by the time we were to start any kind of a study, that the fiscal year may be drawing to a close. The only additive comment that I have at this point in time on that, so I think there's alignment there, and I note alignment generally with Kevin, just talking about it at a staff level. The only thing I would highlight, though, is that $200,000 to play with still would have us looking to a lot of that available budget to fund the shortfall. So that a lot of these items, commissioners, may be in play as we get into late May. Hopefully not. Hopefully this would be more of a micro recession, and we'd be in recovery. That being acknowledged, we're not planning for it. we're planning to be conservative in our approach. And that's why we wanted to present all of this information to you today.
Okay. I reached out to Kevin because it was before the meeting. There was nothing reflected in the item. And I assumed without board direction, Ben, that you were not talking with him about reducing this line item. We gave you direction. We approved it. You were moving forward. I want to get to budget reductions in just a second, but if this money is not needed right now for this study in FY20, and even if that line item was reduced, if you did across the board reduction based on revenues, it still seems like there may be some remainder. And what it feels like here is we're cobbling together 20,000 here, 25 there, 100,000 here to try to get a pool of money if we're going to do a second stimulus, if you will. So I would like to put that on the table as whatever else we decide today. And I'm not going to make a motion right now, but once we get to a motion, I would like to see a conversation with FSU be part of that motion, because it does sound like Kevin and the administration is open to reducing that line item this year if we can put it in FY20. You just talked about, I'm sorry?
Yeah.
Okay. Other staff reductions, and that was just one other question I had, that when we had a commission meeting yesterday, particularly the TDC item, of course, our bed taxes hit dramatically. We saw some great work by Carrie Post and her team to really analyze their budget and reduce some contracts and other things like that. We've got more than 50% of OEV budget in staff, and you all are doing a phenomenal job. I think we have to acknowledge how important the work you're doing is right now, so I'm not looking at staff and things like that, but if there are other contracts or other things that we do not need to focus on in the next few months, for example, the business attraction, these new programs, the 550,000. If we're not going to be recruiting anybody in the next 6 months, let's move that money to emergency stimulus so that we can get sales tax coming back into the coffers, and then we can go and recruit businesses in 2021 and after. I just think that those types of strategies should be on the table. Is that possible, Ben and Christina?
A couple of thoughts. Yeah, it is. A couple of thoughts, and I do want to clarify. The convention center study is included as a component of the 200,000. That's thought number one. Thought number two, and you hit the nail on the head.
I'm sorry, you just said it is included?
Yes. It is.
Okay.
It is included. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Number two, as you would anticipate, and this table does not include operational costs or staffing. When we come back to you in May to really get down to brass tacks in terms of what is the estimated shortfall in fiscal year 20 and how can we close that gap, we're going to look at everything, not just the capital budget. So I want to be clear on that as well. Accordingly, and in line with both what the county administrator has done at the county and the city manager has done with the city, OEV is also in place, are in a hiring freeze, and we are actively looking at what we can cease expenditures on in advance of that conversation to mitigate the costs and have the costs, to the best extent possible, meet those revenues as they are actually coming in versus what was budgeted.
Okay. Well, Mr. Chair, I'm sorry, that got real in the weeds, but that's where we are here, right? We're in the weeds on the details. I almost wish there was like a real-time notes of the budget here. It's hard to, I mean, we've got the tables in our agenda and everything, but really tracking how much might be on the table right now for a second stimulus before we even talk about infrastructure would be helpful. And I hear what you're saying. We don't have the projections necessarily. You're rounding out those numbers, but I'm just trying to hone in on that. And I think it would be helpful to distill that at some point after the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Up next, I've got Commissioner Bryant, Commissioner Williams-Cox, and Commissioner Richardson. I'm going to take kind of a 2-minute chair's prerogative here. I don't usually wait to speak to the end, but I want to clarify a couple of things so we don't go down this. In my opinion, I think if we're going to have a discussion about a second stimulus, instead of trying to figure out where the money might come from in all the different pots we've got, it ought to be do we or don't we want to do it? And then we can determine how we do that. That's my opinion. I feel like if you run down the table and you look, the Moody's reported this morning that the state is facing an $8 to $10 billion shortfall. Based on what I've seen here today, best guess estimates, you guys are forecasting about a $3.7 million shortfall that you got to figure out how to reallocate and shuffle.
Yes.
Last night at the county, we, on wild-eyed guess, Alan gave us kind of a pretty grim picture, but $4 to $7 million. You know, the federal government has just put $2 trillion on the table, and I would argue that we changed gears from a provider of funds to a navigator of funds. Christina pointed out earlier that the money's been committed, the money's been awarded, and the people are actually getting the money from the federal and state programs. And those amounts dwarf anything, in my opinion, that we're going to be able to do. I really worry that we're going to handicap ourselves because we're not the federal government. We can't print money to make this work. And so every dollar we take out and put in the community, which we did yeoman's work at $1.1 million or whatever we ended up with, was, in my opinion, commendable beyond belief. I mean, I think we led the charge, but I feel pretty strongly that what's going to pull us out of this on the other side is getting these projects off the ground and being able to turn right around and say, or go, not saying, well, wait a minute, we handicapped them because we pushed that off or we took them anyway. So Matt, and I apologize, I just thought I'd interject that. So there's not a question there, that's just a statement. So Commissioner Bryant, followed by Commissioner Williams-Cox, followed by Commissioner Richardson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I really didn't raise my hand, but I'll take advantage of it.
Okay.
The 228,000 that I think we're saying is available, I just want to strongly support doing what we can for nonprofits. Like now, not at the end of the day. I also want to support the fact that we need to wait until we can do some appropriate projections before we start to spend additional money. I agree with you, Mr. Chair, that we really need to know and become facilitators of the monies that are already available, that's getting out into the community, so that we can know where people are, where businesses stand, and then make an informed decision. So since I took advantage of being on the floor, I want to say that I do support the nonprofits and what we can do for them right now. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Commissioner Bright. Commissioner Williams-Cox, followed by Commissioner Richardson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you, Ben and crew, for trying to find dollars. But as you might know, $200,000 is not going to get us very far down the road. So I know that you are going to be looking for more. You know, last time we talked about $1 million. And so I don't know where we find that, but I have a couple of suggestions. Ben, I see you turning around. Somebody in the room knows where that money is, and I need y'all to go get it. For projects that have not begun, not to delay them, but what about redating those projects so that we can at least get our way to the next fiscal year or next year? And I follow what Commissioner Dozier was saying and having the conversation she had with FSU. But I think we need to remember one thing, that this board is the ones who decide on these projects and how much gets allocated to them. And if we've decided on a project and made an allocation, those individuals need to understand that we are in a place where we did not anticipate being. And so we shouldn't be in a posture of asking permission, but we should be in a posture of helping them to understand that we are going to need to do what we need to do to make sure that we can make it to their project in the future. As I said to our city manager, I have a philosophy that I created myself from my finance class, you know, the calculation of present and future value of money. Well, this is my take on it. If presently you don't have the money, the future ain't gonna matter. So what we need to do is, presently we're in a situation we did not anticipate, but thank God we have some monies that we can, unlike some other communities, where we can look at strategically how we can redate projects so that we can use those funds to support nonprofits. Because last meeting, we were very clear that we needed to come back and help nonprofits. I'm also hearing today that we may need to help some additional small businesses, and I'm okay with that. But we've got to get to the nonprofits first, because they're dying out there, and they're the ones who are providing service to our most vulnerable communities. And I watched your meeting yesterday, almost 5.5 hours of it, and time I cannot get back, but watch you all do great work. But one of the things that I heard great discussion about was the CHSP process, which is a process to help nonprofits. And your hearts were open to helping those organizations who provide to our community, who may or may not be able to provide to themselves. So we've got to find more than $200,000 to help nonprofits, because, as you know, that's not going to go a long way. So we've got to figure it out. And I'm wanting to get it from wherever we need to get it from, and then we can. And I don't want to sit here and go through line by line and tell you. That's your job. I want you all to find it and let us know how much you found. Thank you for coming to the table with 200,000, but we need more. We just need more. So. That's where I am at this point in time. So is there a possibility to redate some projects, to push them back? You know, I'm a project manager. I know that schedule and budget are important for projects, but we need to see if we can redate, slide some back that haven't started, or look at where monies are available. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right, I've got next up Commissioner Richardson, Commissioner Maddox, Commissioner Lindley. Commissioner Williams-Cox, thank you for the comment we did last night, shuffle the deck with CHSP to allow a different allocation of funds. We didn't actually up the amount, we just basically, and then with bond and with some of the homeless issues and neighborhood clinics, we actually put some additional money into help. But yeah, we're trying.
I asked a question. I'd asked the question, so I'm hoping I'm going to get an answer before we move on.
Yes, ma'am. No, I heard the question. I want to give you full confidence that the answer can be and is found in your materials. It's we did the legwork for you. So, and I know it's a lot and it could be confusing, but here's the bottom line. You've got two places to look from, and I'm going to make it very simple as I can. When you talk about additional funds for an additional grant. Place number one is within the OED budget this year. That's the $200,000. And that's the table on page 24. But that's not all of it. Because of the legal analysis that was performed, and that's laid out in the material, forget the page, we do another section, because the legal analysis said you could reallocate from fiscal year 20 capital projects for Blueprint 2020 project. And that starts on page 25. And we list all the projects, but we put an asterisk next to 3. You got 500,000 Lake Lafayette and St. Mark's Regional Park. You got 1 million, just shy of 1 million, because you spent some money, 80,000, for Monroe Adams Corridor placemaking. And you've got 3.5 million that's not yet been activated for planning work on Airport Gateway. So that is also in play. That's it. That's in terms of your staff presentation of what may exist on both the OEB side, pending the budget workshop, and on the Blueprint 2020 infrastructure side pending your budget workshop.
And for those people who do not have those pages who are listening in, what is that grand total?
Let's just look at, well, the OED side is easy because the grand total is 200, just over 200,000. But as was discussed on the blueprint side, that adds up to just shy of 5 million. However, in May, you're going to be looking at a hole to fill of 3.7 million. That's going to have to come from there or somewhere. Doesn't have to just come from there, but that would be one place you'd be looking to.
So if we go ahead right now and take the 3.7 off the top, and or whatever, so we're talking about a little over a million and some change.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. Got up Commissioner Richardson, Commissioner Maddox, Commissioner Lindley, Commissioner Matlow, and then Mayor Daley. Commissioner Richardson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't want to be redundant, but I concur with you and what you and Commissioner Bryant have said. I think it would be prudent of us to have some more exact figures before we start spending money that we don't have. I mean, we don't really know where we are economically at this point. And as we all know, we can't generate money like the federal government does. We have to balance a budget at the end of the year, both OEV and the city. And so when we take money from one pot, that means something has to, based on the budget that we've approved for the year, that means something has to be lost from that pot. And so keep that in mind as we talk about shifting money around. I think that, we can delay projects, but when you start to delay projects, that means that it could take us longer to come out of this economic slump. I think, we ought to try to stay as true to what we've promised the voters, as we did with the first round of sales tax dollars, that we try to stay as true to what was promised to the voters this time around as the last time. And it may be even more important now, because the sooner we can get some of those projects up and going, creating jobs and infusing money into the economy, I think it's better. I think Commissioner Williams-Cox said we will have the money there when the time comes. I am fully in support of doing whatever we can to assist our nonprofits. They contribute so much to this community. Like I said, I've been out there with Second Harvest and Farm Share, and I see the lines getting longer every time we do a food distribution. The diversity of the people coming through those lines is changing every time. And so and that's just one example of the kind of services that our nonprofits provide for citizens in this community. And certainly they need our support, both our personal support through contributions. I would remind us of that, but also what we can provide as local government. So it's a difficult balancing act. But I think it ought to be based on the best information that we have at the time we make a definitive decision on how monies are going to be spent. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner Richardson, and you're rocking that shirt. It's right. Commissioner Maddox. Commissioner Maddox, then Lindley, then Matlow, then Daley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to let the board know and the public know I'll be recusing myself from this vote for the appearance of a conflict. I'm not sure I have a conflict, but I am CEO of a nonprofit. Just want to make sure, in abundance of caution, that I recuse myself from this vote. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Lindley.
Thank you. A couple of things. I definitely agree with you, Mr. Chairman, about the shortfall that's coming. We really need to be cautious, I think. And I agree, and I know from experience that the infrastructure jobs that we create help that government created got us through the last recession in large part in pretty good standing. I see a couple of places. I want to help the nonprofits too. I see a couple of places where I think we might be able to get $750,000 for them, which is $750,000. It would be the $200,000 the OEV balance right now, and the $550,000 of the unallocated projects. This keeps all of the money within economic vitality pocket. It's $750,000. It's not $1 million that we gave to small businesses, but there's not the numbers either, nonprofits. So I would, and not touch the blueprint money at this point for the reasons that Commissioner Richardson and Brian and the chair and others have articulated. So I would make a motion, if this is possible, $750,000 for the nonprofits through the OEV balance and the unallocated projects, leaving the blueprint money alone at this time.
I would second that.
Okay, we have.
I would agree with that also, Mr. Chair.
Ben, Ben had some clarifications on numbers here, Commissioner Lindley, because he wants to make sure that you're dealing with.
I want to make sure, I thank you for your indulgence. So Christina and I are going to make sure that we say it simple and accurately and directly. Commissioners, you've got what this table on page 24 is really showing you is it's showing you your adopted budget, a portion of your adopted OEV budget. And then at the top, it points to what we acknowledge is going to be a mitigation, a loss of revenue below the budgeted amount. And that's the 1.81. It's a $1,181,974. And we know if this keeps pace going into the end of May, we got to find that from somewhere within your overall adopted budget. And then we get into the projects that were funded, analogous. And as I said earlier today, there is more to the OEV budget, particularly in operations and personnel, but this is really your flexible funding that you have. When you tally up all, including some of the components, Commissioner Lindley, you just identified, it comes out to $1.41 million. So you don't have 700. I mean, if we were to move forward here with the thought that you're going to be looking to each of these available budget items on rows 9 through 24 going into May, you only have a couple $100,000 left after if you want to. Yeah, 233, 926 is what all that you would have left. So there's not $750,000 here. There's $750,000 in your infrastructure budget in those 3 projects that I identified, but not here, not in the OEV budget.
But the money for unallocated projects, it's not spent, correct? It's just,
it's not.
I mean, it's in place.
It's there, but it's a component of the 1.4 million remaining. That's $550,000 of the $1.41 million that we've got to take potentially $1.181 million out of, is what we're sharing with you. This is a real precursor. Before you get into a grant conversation for OEV, what this table does more than anything is it gives you an idea as to what you're looking at in late May when it comes to doing a mid-year adjustment on your budget. That's really what this table does. And it paints a clear picture to you today that when you put in everything that you haven't spent yet on all of these projects and programs we've talked about, you really don't have much left if you think that, if you consider that you're going to be utilizing some of this to balance your budget. Sobering, I know.
Okay, we have, go ahead, Commissioner.
No, go ahead. I mean, I want to hear what others have to say on this.
Okay. So if I, to paraphrase what Ben said, yeah, there's really 3.7, they know shortfall, probably more to come depending on how this goes. That's a best guess estimate. And that wipes out just about everything you've got available. That's in OEV. Yeah.
So for $208,000, which includes your previous motion that you just took. And the commissioners, one thing your OEV team has done is suspended all of our spending outside of expenditures that were already pending. And we'll continue to bring recommendations to you at your May workshop about further implications on your FY20 budget.
Realizing, of course, that the $1 million that we just put out was fronted by the city and the county. We have not even collected that. So, I say let's tap the brakes, one man's opinion. So, Commissioner Lindley, do you have anything else for the good of the order?
Not at this time. I mean, I guess, looking at the blueprint money, I mean, I really hate going into that. It seems like that's a great investment to keep that money on the table, but look forward to hear what other people have to say. I mean, the balance, as Commissioner Richardson said, it's a tough one. Maybe we could take a portion of the blueprint money. I don't want us to take all of the money even from those two projects. That's $1.5 million. I just don't want to put that much into nonprofits, so I know they could use it. As someone else earlier said, anything we do is a drop in the bucket compared to what they all need. I would be willing to look at some of the blueprint money, I guess. I would do it really reluctantly, see what the will of the group is. I might be willing to go for 500,000 of that. Could we take part of it from each of them, or would that be of St. Mark's and Monroe Adams? Would that be foolish to reduce each of them by a portion?
Or delay them.
Or as Diane said, redate them.
Mr. Chair, point of order.
Yes.
There's a motion and a second on the table, I don't know what we need to.
I probably need to withdraw that motion. If it just seems like that unallocated funds, that's just out of the question, and that's part of our problem coming.
Yeah, I'll reluctantly withdraw my second.
I'll reluctantly withdraw it.
Okay.
But if we could find even $750,000, maybe not a full $1 million for nonprofits, it'd probably be helpful. It wouldn't be a godsend. But we don't have a godsend. So maybe what about
where are we in the comment queue?
I've got Matlow, Daly, and Minor up next.
Okay, can I go in behind Minor?
Yes, ma'am.
But
Mr. Chair, I've been in the queue for some time. Can you see the hands that are raised?
I am getting it by smoke signals by the IT group here, so it's a little convoluted. Okay. I'm keeping a list.
If you don't mind checking that list, I may not be the only one that's been in the queue for a while. Thank you.
Could I ask the staff, could we take portions of the St. Mark's and the Monroe Adams each, or does that just wreck every plan to take a little from each?
Yeah, go ahead, Ben. Ben, why don't you address it?
You can. No, of course you can. You can take up to the amount that was budgeted and anything in between. I
mean, I don't know if that would make more sense to just do one, not the other.
They're both in the same posture, Commissioner. They have not been acted on, and we're preparing for preliminary analysis related to those projects.
Okay, so, I got it. Uh-huh.
And they're really in a similar situation.
Okay. You want to let it rest for now, and we'll keep circling around?
Yeah, keep circling around.
Okay, all right. I've got Commissioner Matlow, followed by Mayor Daley, followed by Commissioner Minor, then Williams, Cox, and Dozier. If I'm missing anybody else, let me know.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Great conversation so far. I think it's abundantly clear as we start to tighten up the budget. We're not going to be able to do everything we thought we were going to be able to do even 6 months ago. Some of that may be just how fast we do it when we start to look at how much we have obligated to just debt service on projects, and does it make sense to push something out 2 years or 3 years or even 5 years, that we can make sure we deliver the most amount of benefit we can to our community without necessarily ending a project, especially, we saw a convention center go from 20 million to 40 million overnight. I think we have to have real conversations about how can we deliver on some of these projects that we want to deliver at a lower cost, how we can bring in other funding sources to make some of these things happen. But I do think before we can look long-term, we do need to look at the immediate need, especially where OAB is concerned. So I will support funding for the nonprofits, as well as additional funding for small businesses. Looking at what's on the table now, I expect in May we'll come back with a bigger conversation of the long-term and how we can save money on individual projects, and whether honestly a convention center should eat up what could potentially be 80% of our budget now. We just don't know those numbers. I think those conversations should be delayed for probably 3 to 6 months as we have a really better understanding of the economic impact this virus is going to have. Every day people change their minds. We're either coming back or we're headed into a recession, or it's going to be stronger than ever. We just don't know. And, I think once we get back to work and the stay-at-home orders are lifted, we'll have a better understanding of what the future may hold. But looking at the projects, the funding allocated on the blueprint side, I do think there's room to bring over $750,000 to $1 million immediately. I'd look at all three of those projects, part of the airport gateway, and just see allocate that money to get it into the hands of people who need it now, and then look at where we can find savings on those projects in the future to make sure we can still do them. We may have to really sharpen our pencil to see how we can deliver a great product for a little bit cheaper. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Matlow. I've got Mayor Daley, followed by Commissioner Minor, Williams, Cox, Dozier, and Jackson. Mayor Daley.
Mr. Chairman, this is a great conversation. Thank you. And you're running an incredible meeting. I, too, am very much in favor of nonprofit support. And I really like the comments of Commissioner Williams Cox, Commissioner Minor, and the thinking of Commissioner Marianne Lindley. Let me throw some ideas on the table, too. I do think $750,000 for nonprofit support in a program that mirrors CEDAR, where you have to have a proven need and have to, draw in additional resources as well. Been much of what we've talked about along the way is very appropriate, and we know that you can execute it in a great manner because you have proven that to us through the CEDAR program. So then again, the question is about the money. One thought that I have when we're trying to come up with the $750,000 mark, Commissioner Lindley, I think you're right on track. And Commissioner Williams Cox, I think you're right on track. When we look specifically at the Ccq projects, there are 2 projects that are in line that we have not even begun yet. So Commissioner Williams Cox, theoretically, if we started today, we have $500,000 for St. Mark's Lafayette, and we have $1 million for Monroe Adams. And I agree with your thought process that we simply push back a few months. This would still allow us to begin those projects in fiscal year 2019-2020, but we would not need to allocate every single penny, I'm assuming, until we hit the next fiscal year. We're not saying we're not going to do them. We're just saying that we're going to push back on the time frame a little bit. And Commissioner Lindley, I hesitantly agree with you as well, that if we are going to support $750,000 for nonprofit relief, we could take only, not zero out any one project, but we have a line item for St. Mark's of $500,000. So I would use $250,000 as a suggestion out of St. Mark's Lafayette. So we are leaving money in that project that we can begin in a couple of months, just not right now. And then out of the Monroe Adams Street corridor placemaking, I would take $500,000, which still leaves $500,000, which allows us in a few months from now to begin that program. Did I get my numbers right, or did I get them backwards, Ben?
You got them right.
Okay.
But then you've still got the $200,000 OEV money.
Right. So what I would do, Commissioner Lindley, is I do think, and I agree with Commissioner Matlow in some of your previous comments, that there might be need to do maybe an extended 1 more week of the CEDAR program for small businesses with a very limited amount of money for those businesses that, for whatever reason, did not have an opportunity, changed their mind, or did not apply, and we could bring it to a hard stop, I would allocate $100,000 out of that pot that you just referenced, Commissioner Lindley, to go to Cedar. Look, if we don't spend it, we don't spend it. People don't apply for it, people don't apply for it, but that would allow us to extend Cedar for another week or however long we determine. It places a small amount of money, but still gives opportunity for small businesses to apply. And we take that $750,000, we just delay the start of those projects a couple of months, but knowing full well that we will start them and eventually bring them to fruition. But it also allows us to take care of the nonprofit community. Here's one thing that really concerns me, and I'll end on this. Our nonprofits, not only as economic engines in our community, employ people, but they also do amazing work. One thing that keeps me up at night is, if some of our nonprofits don't make it, who is going to pick up the responsibility of whatever the mission of the nonprofit is? Now, we want to talk about great cost to our community. If a nonprofit, heaven forbids, closes their door and everybody is looking for the city or the county to pick up those services, now that is going to be an expensive proposition. I think now more than ever, we should try to support our nonprofit community in a very responsible way, but of providing a framework much like Cedar, bringing in more federal dollars, which we all know many of these nonprofits have at least applied for the Paycheck Protection Program, so they would qualify. But it keeps the nonprofits moving forward, not only with employment, not only as economic engines, but also providing the needed services in this community. So those are my thoughts, and I put it on the table. And if appropriate, Mr. Chairman, I'd be willing to come back and make a motion after everyone speaks.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've got Commissioner Minor, Commissioner Williams, Cox, Commissioner Dozier, and Commissioner Jackson. Thank you. Commissioner Minor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Like many people on the board, I want us to do something for nonprofits today. We talked about it at the last meeting. If I could go back then, I think we should have done something back then to help out nonprofits. But we're here now. I want us to try to figure out something where we can provide them the assistance that we need. We did a lot of great work at the County Commission yesterday to help out CHSP agencies, but that's a small percentage of the number of nonprofits in this community that need help. And so I really want us to do something today. I think the mood of the board is similar to that. With regard to additional assistance for small businesses under Cedar, I think we need to keep in mind that for small businesses as well as nonprofits, we need to try to retain the role of being a bridge to the bridge. We don't have the resources to provide the same type of funding that state or federal government has. But I think the budget discussions that we have in May are going to be a really important thing for us. We're living in a different world than the world we were living in a month ago. Markets are going to change. Industries are going to change. I don't know what this is going to mean for construction costs, which were surging before COVID came along. I don't know what it's going to be like in the next 2 to 3, 6 months. Labor costs. We don't know these things. Having that budget discussion in May is going to give us at least we'll have a little bit more data by that time where we can start to make some plans about what we need and how we need to prioritize everything that's on our plate. With regard to the projects that haven't started yet, Airport Gateway, the 2 Ccq projects, I support what Daley is talking about, what Mayor Daley is talking about. I think we need to do what we can to get the funds that we have to help out nonprofits, extend the Cedar program for a short amount of time to be that bridge to the bridge. I want us to retain that role on doing what we can for the immediate future for nonprofits and for small businesses. But I really do think when we have our budget discussions, we got to put everything on the table. And Commissioner Williams Cox mentioned this, I think in January or at the last meeting. But we need to put everything on the table, figure out which of these projects that we have funded for infrastructure are going to be economic stimulus for us. Very much what the County Commission did in 2008, 2009 with the shovel-ready stimulus funds that were a bolster for our local economy. In May, I want us to take a look at that and figure out which of these projects is going to be the biggest economic stimulus for us at a time when they are sorely needed relative to the others, and have that type of discussion about which ones we need to think about delaying further and which ones you wanted to keep retained. That's a big discussion we're going to have in May to help us get there. But for now, for the immediate future, I agree with where Mayor Daley's going, Commissioner Williams-Cox. I think we need to do something urgent for nonprofits and extend CEDAR to help out a second round of businesses that haven't applied yet. So Mayor Daley, when you make that motion, I'm hoping I'll be there to second it once you make that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, thank you, Commissioner Minor. I've got Commissioner Williams-Cox, followed by Commissioner Dozier, followed by Commissioner Jackson. Commissioner Williams-Cox.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a question, and since the mayor did not make the motion, I'm ready for the motion, but I have a question that I need answered first. To extend this opportunity for a week to those businesses who may have not have been able to take advantage of it, of the CEDAR program, what is going to be the requirement? Because now the SBA process, isn't that closed now? Or can they still, because part of that criteria was that they had to apply to the bridge in order to be able to qualify for the bridge to the bridge. So what would happen now?
I think, I'm sorry, was that question for me or for?
No, it's for Ben and Christina.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Commissioner, I think as I understand the motion yet to be made, it would have the same criteria. So it could be for the emergency bridge loan or for the SBA. And keeping in mind, there are likely businesses out there that have since April the 6th applied for those, including potentially before it shut down, that may be interested in the bridge loan. The bridge is the bridge, the CEDAR grant. So I hope that answers your question. But as I understand what's being contemplated for that $100,000 component, it's the CEDAR grant exactly as it is.
Okay, I don't know what happened, but I can't see anybody anymore.
We can't hear.
But I want to yield to my mayor to make the motion that he discussed. And I'm hoping that we're thinking the same, that we're going to be talking about somewhere in the neighborhood of $1.5 million to extend and to support the nonprofits.
All right. I've got, Mr. Mayor, do you want to back in and put a motion on the table?
When you think it's appropriate.
Let me go through the rest of the people that have been waiting, if you don't mind. And if there's no motion, I'll circle back to you. How's that?
Okay.
How about Commissioner Dozier? I've got then Commissioner Jackson, and then I'll circle back to Mayor Daley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So my questions earlier about the unallocated projects, those types of things, I see what you all were doing, taking out the revenue shortfall from the project fund. And I understand we're going to look at other things in May. I agree with some of the other comments that we're going to have to make a lot of, we could have to make a lot of hard choices, city, county, and Blueprint OEV budgets, all of our budgets. However, I guess I'm not clear about the CCQ projects that are referenced. Two questions there. First, would the revenue projected shortfalls also affect the line items for CCQ, or are you less concerned about that, and particularly those projects that have not yet started?
Commissioner, was that, Mr. Chairman?
That's a question for you guys. Why would we see the 550 million, 550,000 in unallocated projects under OEV? That's impacted by the projected revenue shortfall, but the CCQ projects that haven't yet begun are not impacted by that?
No, if you look at narrative, the analysis, it covers it. It covers that we do consider that they would be impacted.
Right.
But yes, those projects listed on the table of page 27 6, the blueprint infrastructure, all of those could come into play when we start looking at the $3.765 million anticipated shortfall that is discussed on page 27 of the agenda materials.
Okay. Ben, it looked obvious to me, but we're not talking about it in the same terms. When we're talking about allocating money from those infrastructure projects, the CCQ projects, I didn't hear that we were adjusting based on projected revenue shortfall in the same way that we were with the others. So what you have on this list is as adopted. So Lake Lafayette, St. Mark's, is there 500,000 or is there less based on the revenue projected shortfall?
You're in the same scenario. If you look at, and I'm going to answer it this way. If you look at the fiscal year 20 as adopted on table 1, page 26, you see $21,126,875 worth of projects. That includes the ones we've been speaking of, the $3.5 million for the airport gateway, the $500,000 for Lake Lafayette, St. Mark's, and the $1 million for Monroe Adams corridor placemaking. All of those $21 million will be part of your consideration in late May when you look at a $3.7 million shortfall.
Okay, you keep referencing the OEV budget on page 26.
No, I'm sorry, that was the blueprint budget.
Right. Okay.
It's 28.
It's page 28, exactly. That's what I just wanted to make sure we were on the same page. Okay, so with that, we don't know that we have all of this money to allocate to this program. That's what I'm trying to drive at. We're going to see a motion in a minute to allocate money from CCQ projects that have not yet begun to a stimulus program, an emergency program. Do we have all the money that's on this list on 28? You just said no. We have to reduce those numbers. Correct?
To try and keep it as apples to apples, I think as you're looking at it, OEV versus blueprint infrastructure, stated a different way. You've got 3 infrastructure projects that we've identified that have not yet begun that total just shy of $5 million.
Yes.
From those 3, I would say you conservatively have $1.3 million, no more, to pull from when you consider the $3.7 million shortfall we see today. Similarly, on the OEV table that we've discussed repeatedly, you've got $1.4 million worth of available budget, not yet expended, for a series of from a series of OEV projects that you may consider pulling 1.18 million of a shortfall, leaving you, if you were to do it that way, 200,000 just over that you conservatively could have confidence that you have available to you today. So 2 different programs looked at under the best guise, a month and a half short of your budget workshop. And if you were to take action today, what could you conservatively have confidence in tapping?
Okay. I think we're all pretty smart. We're all looking at these numbers. We've all been in this conversation for a long time. And we all across the board, Mr. Chair, you said this early on. Do we ask the question whether or not we want to help nonprofits and do another emergency stimulus for small business? My answer would be the same as a majority of the others. Yes, with the caveat that a lot of you have said, I don't want to harm our ability to get back to work as quickly as we can, nor get into a scenario where we don't have the money coming into OEV or blueprints to do the basics that we need to do. So that's why I'm digging in and asking these questions, because that table on 28, if I'm understanding the mayor's proposed motion correctly, I'm seeing us allocate more money there than what I'm hearing from you all may be available come May. So I'm just very concerned about touching any of the infrastructure money. And let me ask you one more question on this. The Lake Lafayette, St. Mark's, and Miss County Administrator, I think the county was managing a portion of the stormwater study. I'm sorry, that was the alternative sewer study that I'm thinking of. Is anything in that portion dealing with the water quality that we've dealt with in the past, or that was all sewer related?
Are you talking about
the Lake Lafayette St. Mark's? Is that that's the boardwalks, that's the parks, that's the other things, correct? Okay.
That's what that is.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure it wasn't.
Yeah, I understand.
Okay. I want to make sure it wasn't water quality. We're dealing with one crisis we didn't prepare for. I don't want to impact another crisis we're trying to prepare for. So, okay, to my colleagues, I know I'm asking a lot of questions here. I think it's very similar to what Commissioner Lindley, I see you on the screen right now, so I'll mention you and Commissioner Bryan, others. I mean, it's what we're trying to wrap our minds around, is what is available to make a decision today versus what's unknown and maybe impacted come May, and our ability to do more things in the future. So without more clarity on those infrastructure projects, and also a conversation about what we could do in the next few years, I'm really struggling with that piece. So I'm going to set that aside, Mr. Chair, and there is one other thing that I had not gotten to yet. In this item, and I really appreciate the analysis of all the different federal and state programs, you list CDBG grants, emergency solutions grants, housing money, all of which the city could qualify for, that has been in the past a huge support for our homeless coalition, for Kearney Center, for others, for our housing initiatives. If we are looking at infusing money into our nonprofits, it seems like it would be in the interest of both city and county commission to have our arms wrapped around what we're doing individually and what we're doing together. Because as you all have rightly said, there's a lot of resources already on the tables for nonprofits. So I want to make sure we're accessing all those dollars. I would really like to know, since this is our one joint meeting, if the city plans to take up a similar CHSP item at your next meeting, because advance funding some of the money for FY20, I'm hearing from nonprofits that that's very helpful, and I would love for that to be accessible for those who are funded from the city as well. I think that also helps. I do think a small dollar emergency program would be extremely beneficial for nonprofits, just like it was for small business. I agree with Commissioner Minor. We probably should have done it last time. But the funding source is where we got hung up at the last meeting, and I'm concerned we're about to get hung up there again because of these unknown factors. So the last piece, if we want $1 million, is this something we could look at funding a portion from OEV, a portion from city, and a portion from county, and have and feed money back to OEV from city and county budgets, again, acknowledging our fiscal issues that we're going to have in the future. But that would be another scenario here, to cobble together a grant program that preserved some of the infrastructure and got us out of the way of some of these unknown factors we're not going to really see until May or later. So, Mr. Chair, I'm trying to wrap my mind around it, but I do think we have other options we could explore. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, on point.
Yes, ma'am. Commissioner Williams.
Speaking to what Commissioner Dozier just said, I heard you say that for the $1 million for the CEDAR program, we already, the city and county, we fronted that money already. So I think we're already doing some of that, some of what has been suggested also. But the other part of it is that I don't see where the CHSP, we need to complicate what we're trying to do today by bringing in that process, because it has its own complications already. So I will hope that we want to keep this very clear and keep this conversation with OEV and Blueprint. I understand what we're trying to do here, but I think we need to rely on staff based on the information that they've given us to go find $1.5 million, which has kind of been identified, so that we can help the nonprofits today and to extend a little bit, and then like you say, have a robust conversation in May. But right now, we need to provide help now to keep these organizations going.
Mr. Chair, real quick, since, Commissioner Williams-Cox, one thing, every little bit helps. As Christina said repeatedly earlier, federal government's got the big purse here. It's going to take a little while to bring in those funds. Thankfully, some are coming in. We're trying to do the little bits we can. So I do think ESG grants and CHSP are critical for us. They're not the same thing as the emergency fund. I completely agree with that. I think we did ask staff to go out and give us a line item for dollars that were available, but I don't actually know if those dollars are going to be available come May. That's my question here. And lastly, Ben, if you would clarify this piece, because Commissioner Williams-Cox just picked up on something I wanted to ask about, or Mr. Chair, you said it. The money that we used for the first program, the $1 million, that was allocated to OEV back in 15 or 16. Or 16, Christina, you're nodding. So that was the money city and county put into OEV in 16 to help stand up the program. This didn't come out of our general fund last month or 2 weeks, a few weeks ago. This was money we allocated 6 or 4 years ago, and we were going to get paid back. I don't know if we just deferred that loan or if we forgave that loan, city and county. We didn't really get to that question, but this did not come out of our general fund for FY20. And I think that's important to note, because I think city and county are still whole in that respect. And we could look at city or county dollars to help support these efforts. We should. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, Commissioner. Okay, I think on that point, OEV and Blueprint just started collecting money. So there's $1 million that came out of the combined city and county, as you pointed out, to prop them up. That money on the street, it wasn't because they had collected it. And all of the budget numbers we're looking at are primarily future elections, which are getting hammered. So I've got Commissioner Jackson, the mayor, Commissioner Maddox, Commissioner Richardson, Commissioner Williams-Cox, and Commissioner Lindley. Let's get a motion and get something moving up or down at some point. Commissioner Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Christina, just a quick point of clarification. I've been doing quite a bit of math tutoring in my side job lately. You get to the 208,000 by taking that 233 and reducing it by the other 13 applicants that were participating after that April 6th deadline in the CEDAR program. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, so that's the difference between the 233 represented that I saw somewhere in the agenda. Yeah, right here at the bottom of our chart, and the 208 that is the actual money available. I couldn't agree with, and I've heard a lot of people speak, so if I attribute comments to the wrong person, it's certainly not intentional. I couldn't agree more with Mayor Daley. I have seen firsthand by handing out over 1,000 meals to folks in the western parts of Leon County over these last 3 weeks. I couldn't agree more with we all want to do something for the nonprofits. And at the same time, I couldn't agree more with Commissioner Richardson because we know that at some point our way out of this economic shortfall will be jobs. And these projects represent jobs for our community. And as you have seen, one of the few essential jobs that continues to carry on every single day here in my travels back and forth, limited travels back and forth, obviously, are construction. So we know that delaying and not starting projects or pausing projects is putting people out of work here locally. I agree that we should try to do something for our nonprofit agencies, simply because without them, there would be families and young children going hungry in our community. And those are and seniors, and those are the most vulnerable among us. I don't know the perfect solution, Mr. Chair. I couldn't agree with you more that we are going to come back in May, and I would anticipate that the projections that Ben is using today, not that he and his staff aren't extremely intelligent, much better at this sort of thing than I am, but I would imagine that even after May and into the summertime and the fall, we are going to see shortfalls that probably could not be predicted by any of us in this room. And I just want to make sure that we take care of what we are supposed to do by being fiscally responsible. That's all I have. I'll listen to and entertain any motions.
Thank you, Commissioner Jackson. Mayor Daley.
Hey, Mr. Chairman, thank you. By the way, Commissioner Jackson, the beard is strong, my friend. The beard.
Man.
I'll still put Commissioner Matlow's beard and Commissioner Richardson's mustache up against Commissioner Max and Commissioner Jackson any day when it comes to the facial hair. Support my colleague, that's for sure.
Okay.
Little bit of levity. Quickly, thanks. I'm taking in everybody's comments, and I think we're getting really close to a point that we can agree upon. I do have a technical question, Ben. Walk the actual projects, because I hear what my colleagues are saying, and I actually agree. I mean, the last thing that we want to do is take jobs off the table and hinder creating jobs. That's what economic development's all about. Walk me through the St. Mark's Lafayette project. Like, what would we be doing if we started now?
Initial planning activities, Commissioner. What I'm envisioning, because these have not yet been initiated, they were targeted for initiation in the last quarter of the fiscal year. And now, it would be pushing it back potentially even just a quarter for both of those. So whether you're speaking of the Lake Lafayette St. Mark's Regional Park or the Monroe Adams Quarter Placemaking, with the exception of the $84,000 we've already spent, they're in the same posture. Okay. You would just be delaying planning activities related to those two projects a handful of months. Should you fulfill or refill, I guess, their budget starting in fiscal year 21.
Okay, that brings great comfort, and I appreciate you explaining that to me. So let me be clear. First of all, we're talking about pushing these two projects back a quarter. And then second, we're not talking about losing construction jobs. This is simply planning function.
So we're in the planning stages for a number of our projects, yes, sir.
All right, Ben, before I make this motion, I want to make sure that if I'm looking for $750,000 for a nonprofit program, that you as the director would be comfortable with the St. Mark's Lafayette and the Monroe Adams two line items as a source of funding.
Yeah. Yes, sir. We worked to develop this agenda material. Those were the two that as they were in the best posture compared to all of your 2020 program having not yet been initiated. If you were to redirect and reallocate, those two in particular would be the best.
And we're not impacting jobs. And are you comfortable with an additional 100,000 out of the OEV line, Christina, going into an extended CEDAR program with a hard stop?
At this point in time, yes, Commissioner, or yes, Mayor.
Okay, I will make the motion, and I want to tell you once again, Ben, I've spent a lot of time with you over the past 24, 48 hours. working through this and the whole program. You and Christina and the team have done a phenomenal job. I would like to make, now tell me how you want me to structure this, Ben, because I do want to give staff the greatest flexibility. Mr. Chairman, please weigh in as well. Do you want to tie a specific dollar amount to, like a dollar amount to the St. Mark's Lafayette project and a dollar amount to the Monroe Adams Street project? Or would you like the motion legally to reflect a total of $750,000 to be out of those two line items, but gives you all the flexibility to be able to move forward?
Just a second, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, no, I get that. No, I'm bringing you back. Yeah. Okay, yeah. If you give the flexibility between those two identified projects as part of your motion, then we'll take from the one that is least of even those two to get started with the planning activities.
Okay, I would like to make a motion that staff creates and executes a program similar to CEDAR for nonprofits and allocate a total of $750,000 be reallocated out of the Ccq projects, the 2020 projects that have not yet been initiated, and to extend the CEDAR small business program by $100,000. Time frame, I'm looking for guidance from you, Mr. Chairman, for another week, another 2 weeks. What does staff recommend?
Whenever the money runs out.
Yeah.
When the money runs out. Okay. Okay.
And just so you're aware, we were going at a clip where, depending on the day, that could have been a day.
Sure.
$100,000 could be gone in a day. But
sure, I understand. I understand.
Mr. Mayor, can you repeat the 100? The 750 is clear, but then what's the 100 for? Did I miss it?
It's the phase 2. And Mr. Mayor, you wanted to be phase 2 of CEDAR, just as CEDAR existed, right? Same terms and conditions and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, I hear the concerns of my colleagues, and actually I agree with some of the concerns. Here's my hesitation. If we change the rules now on the CEDAR program, does that create strife in the business community? I mean, I kind of think we got to keep the program the same, just put an extra 100,000 in to take care of those that do qualify that can move forward. But if we change the program now, what are we doing, and are we going to create a problem? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think it does create a problem.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
That was the concern I had with these two items being tied together in one motion. I mean, we see what's happening with the CHSP grant funding process when the portal was open for a few extra days for those 6 organizations and the strife that it caused among the CHSP organizations. I mean, we've got to stop somewhere. If I were going to do the 100,000, I mean, I would put that into the not-for-profit sector, and we're accomplishing the same goal. I mean, they're different types of businesses, for-profit and not-for-profit, but we're still helping out those small businesses in the community. But to open up this process again for a day, 2 days, a week, then somebody comes along and says, well, if you did it this time, why won't you? I didn't hear about it. Why can't you open it up? I think it creates that kind of problem, just like what we're seeing with CHSP and the strife that it caused among that sector when that portal was opened up for those 6 organizations to apply.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you for the indulgence, Mr. Chairman.
Mayor, back to you. I tend to agree with Commissioner Richardson for what it's worth. Let's keep this simple and easy and fun.
Could the mayor separate nonprofit, make a motion on that, and then
I'll try to, let me back this out so that we can all get there. Let's start with the 750,000. I'd like to make a motion for the 750,000 for nonprofit assistance.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second.
Question.
Mr. Chair, question for me too.
Yeah.
Okay, Commissioner Williams-Cox. I support the motion, but I would like to see us do equal dollars for a nonprofit that we did for small business. We set aside $1 million, and now we're looking at potentially adding to that. Nonprofits operate like small businesses. They have the same kinds of issues. So instead of looking at 750,000, do we not have a place where we can pull a $1 million? Ben?
Times have changed.
Mr. Chairman, on point.
Yeah, Rick, go ahead, but then I'm going to get back to the mayor and let him finish his motion.
Well, I have a question. I have a question on the table.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I have a question about the motion as well.
All right, let's back up to the mayor. Mayor, why don't you clarify your motion, and then let's move down the line, because this is going to really gum things up. Mayor Daley.
The motion again was to create a program similar to Cedar, but for nonprofits, allocating $750,000. However, I am open to the conversation of what Commissioner Williams-Cox just put in play. Coming out of the Ccq projects, the 2020 projects that have not yet been initiated, which in turn would, push them back basically a quarter. Ben, are you clear on the motion?
Yes, sir. And the only thing, if it's helpful, you tying it to Cedar, if it's helpful to the commissioners, your next agenda item actually has a little detail of the key components of Cedar. It's page 80, I think, of the booklet. And the only thing that, if I understand your motion correctly, Mr. Mayor, that would change is this line, this first bullet that says you would have to be a for-profit corporation. This would now mean you have to be a nonprofit corporation, but all the other terms would be the same.
Hold on,
Cedar.
Ben, let me back up. I didn't mean it to be that technical. I don't want to tie it specifically to Cedar. What I'm saying is that you all did a wonderful job creating a program so that people could apply and you can allocate out. All I'm suggesting is $750,000 for the nonprofits. And I know that you have the confidence that you will be able to put together the program. Does that make sense? I don't want to tie it to Cedar. I just want to make sure that we have a program that helps nonprofit.
And completely understood, sir. The reason I bring it up is the Cedar program had, for example, if you're 1 to 10, in this case in a nonprofit, you'd have 1,500s. If it was 11 to 25 employees, it would be 2,500. If you don't like that structure, I would just like to know what you want the amount of the grants to be collectively. But if you tie it to Cedar, it's already there. That's all I was saying.
Sure, Cedar. I'm curious to hear what my colleagues have to say.
Can we just get the motion? Can we just get the motion and not tie it to anything, and then we can figure out the criteria later?
No.
We have the motion. I think it's pretty clear to me. I'd like to I've got a list of people here who have been patiently waiting to speak, and I don't want to turn this into a free-for-all because it's basically kind of disintegrating a little bit. So I understand the motion. $3.3 million nonprofits, follow as closely as you can to Cedar. Don't overcomplicate it. Is that fair, Mr. Mayor?
I would just do a flat allocation to all nonprofits and not base it on the size of the nonprofit. And Ben and I have had extensive conversations about this. And Ben, I'm going to go ahead and mute my microphone. I've said enough. If you can kind of explain what your thoughts would be as the administrator of this program so everybody's kind of clear, I guess, or, and then we'll open it up and hear from everybody else. That would be great.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Okay, Ben, you want to weigh in?
I'll give it a shot. Absolutely. It's helpful to know that the maker of the motion is desiring to just have a flat number. And then, so that leaves it to, if you want to assist more nonprofits, then it might be that 2,500 is the number. But staff would need some direction ultimately at the end of this conversation in terms of what you want it to be. I would just note that at the last meeting, these breakdowns were part of the motion that passed, and so we need to know that. But the mayor and I had talked about, simply having his concept of there being a grant program for nonprofits. In my mind, I think similar to the CEDAR program, it would be important to consider these simple requirements that we had for the first phase. Like, it doesn't have to include employee count, but demonstrate a reduction in revenue, sign the affidavit, have an active utility account, apply for a disaster loan. I think those are, even if you take the employee count out of it, since you're going to give a dedicated number for the grant, if you have just those handful of requirements, we can create that application portal and do it really quickly and process it very quickly. But I do think you want to tie it to COVID, and some of what I just mentioned is a really good tie to justify the public expenditure in an emergency.
Okay, I've got a series of commissioners here, and I apologize, this is a little heavy-handed, but there have been people waiting in the queue. I've got Commissioner Maddox, Commissioner Richardson, Commissioner Williams-Cox, Commissioner Lindley, Commissioner Dozier, Commissioner Proctor. So,
Mr. Chairman, I'm not talking anymore.
All right, thank you, Commissioner Lindley. Commissioner Maddox.
Yeah, you just forgot to clear the queue. I'm good.
You good, Commissioner Maddox?
Yes, sir. Here with me.
Clear the queue.
Same here,
right.
Mr.
Commissioner
Chairman.
Richardson. Commissioner Richardson?
I just forgot to lower my hand.
Thank you. Commissioner Maddox? Commissioner Maddox?
He's good.
Okay. Commissioner Williams-Cox?
I'm good, except that I did mention I'd like to offer a friendly amendment to the motion on the table to raise the amount for nonprofits to $1 million.
Mr. Mayor, in your court. Mr. Mayor.
I was trying. I'm sorry. Yes, I'll accept that friendly amendment for $1 million.
All right, Commissioner Jackson, I think you held the second on that. Are you okay with that?
Moving from 750 to 1 million.
Yes, sir.
All right. I'll hold second.
You're okay? All right. Commissioner Williams-Cox, still in your court.
I'm good, thank you.
Is that okay? All right. Commissioner Dozier.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First clarification, the extra $250,000 that was just added to the motion, and forgive me, you've got Commissioner Bryan on your list, do you not? I just wanted to let her put her hand down before I got started.
I can't see her from mine.
Right, I know. That's why I wanted to ask. And Commissioner Minor was raising his hand too. So just give them a break. Yeah, I wanted to do that first. Okay, so the extra $250,000 that was just added, that's coming from the same source, the CCQ projects. Is that right, Ben? Christina?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So just for clarification here, I think it's optimistic to say these projects would only be delayed by 1 quarter. We've all acknowledged that you're projecting possibly a $3.7 million shortfall for the infrastructure program already. There could be more. And someone mentioned construction material and labor costs as well. So this could extend push these projects back more than a quarter. Is that right? Once we see the full impact in May?
Yeah, what I was sharing was that we had anticipated activating these in the final quarter of the fiscal year. If the board, you are correct.
Okay, Ben, it would push it back more than 2 quarters, perhaps. We don't know. That's my point here, right?
Understood. And this would be predicated on the IA board reauthorizing those projects at those amounts in fiscal year 21 as well, which I don't yet know. We don't yet know.
I'm back. And further budget or revenue shortfalls across the board could hit infrastructure projects, OEV projects beyond what we're already contemplating. That's what we've been talking about the whole time, right? I'm still okay with taking, I mean, I can get there. I'm nervous about it. Like I said before, I can get there for this motion, but as we creep up to $1 million, I think we need to acknowledge it could be well more than a quarter. The other question I have is, if we're looking at those projects that have not yet started, if that's the easiest place to absorb a revenue shortfall, does this mean that the airport gateway project is going to bear the brunt of that projected revenue shortfall? Meaning we're taking money out of Lake Lafayette and Monroe Adams. The other one we hadn't initiated or been planning was that gateway project. Is that going to take the brunt, or do we know yet?
Commissioner, frankly, we don't know yet. We will continue to work on these budget numbers as we've discussed, as you've indicated, both sides, OEV and Blueprint Infrastructure, as we look at new actual data week after week and prepare for the late May budget workshop. Again, this is all very much still going to be in play during the coming months.
So we're about to hand out money in the next couple weeks. I'm just trying to get a sense right now before we get to May what the other ramifications are. So I hear you, we just don't know, but we're going to have to take that shortfall that we're already projecting, the 3.7 million, out of somewhere, right?
Yes. Yes, ma'am.
And it could impact the gateway or other things that are on that list. Is that right?
Yes, ma'am. We will have to. Yes.
Okay. I just wanted to, that wasn't part of the discussion yet. That where else are we going to have to cut money and out of infrastructure, and that could be it. So I think that's important for us to acknowledge if we're moving forward. One of the reasons why I was more comfortable with 750 than $1 million. And that's also a reason why I'm mentioning CHSP and other things, because there are a lot of other resources for nonprofits right now. We need to be strategic and get as much as we can, because we can't cover everything. I guess that answers my 2 questions there. I just really, this is creeping up, and I think we need to do something for nonprofits, but I think we're really getting into a territory that we could impact ourselves in ways that we're not going to be happy with because we don't have all the details. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner. I've got Commissioner Proctor, long lost Commissioner. How are you?
Chairman, thank you all. Thank you all so much for all of your comments today and carrying this meeting so far. I need to say that we've done a great job, our staff, all the compliments that went out earlier for how good we've done. But I'm very disappointed with respect to staffing for this portion of our meeting. Vince Long, I want to know, you're my manager, my administrator. Commissioner Diane Cox is asking, I am supporting. We need $1 million on the table. And I don't know what Mr. Pingree can find, can't find, but me and you done rode a long time. And when we need $1 million, and that's what we want to do for nonprofits, I'm asking you to please help them find us $1 million. So from the last meeting, Commissioner Bryant is in the minutes for saying She expressed support for including nonprofits and local relief efforts. The mayor is on the minutes of saying that he thought the nonprofit utility relief was there. Matt Lowe is saying he supported Daley's suggestion for relief. Proctor is saying that he would support another $1 million to expand programs for pandemic. Williams Cox is in the minutes also calling for support for regarding nonprofits. All of us have weighed in. Why hasn't staff this meeting preparing that we wanted $1 million today? So I am frustrated because there's enough weight in these minutes whereby we said what we wanted to be in place today, and what we're coming here is going around in a circle with the dog catching its tail, and all we want is $1 million. Mr. Long, please find us $1 million. This should not be going on like that. And I'm aware of those challenges that have been put out there, but I believe that it's just possible that we're not going to do $1 million for part of the community, and we half stepping and going 3/4 the way for the other part. I think that Commissioner Williams Cox call is what the minutes reflect. It's the spirit of what we said. It's the power and the glory of what we told our staff we wanted, and we don't have anything like an option that looks like what we said we wanted to do, except for what can't be done. This is amazing. So I'm asking Vince Long to comment. Vince, I'm asking you to find for us. We got too many voices asked for this before we came here today. We want $1 million. Y'all figure this thing out. That's what needs to happen today. Chairman, thank you.
Since Commissioner Proctor asked for a comment, the only thing I can add is that the agenda materials in the analysis provide that $1.3 million is available in the capital projects after you take into consideration the reduced revenues we anticipate. So, and the motion that's on the table aligns with that. So there's enough to accomplish that motion.
All right, that's what we should have had, Vince. Our staff should have been prepped to come back and react to the weight of what the minutes are saying. And if I omitted Richardson's name, his name is there too. We all had thrust to support nonprofit, and you've not given us what we need to select from today. And then we shouldn't be around here for 50 minutes doing this right here. But I want to appreciate and thank the mayor for his motion, and let's get this over with and show that we are strongly in support, because we need them on the front line. We need them and their work, their service, their value, and ain't nothing else to talk about all this other stuff way down the road. We need to give relief right now, because if we don't save people now, it ain't gonna be no down the road. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, thank you, Commissioner Proctor. I've got Commissioner Bryant, Commissioner Minor, and Commissioner Lindley, and I'd like to bring this in for a landing if we can. Commissioner Bryant.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I have been waiting a while, so some of my comments are moved right now. But let me say, I do support. I support the $1 million. I think we ought to do it. And the mindset for me is that we don't know what next week will bring, not to think of next. What we do know is that we will have to take what we have, and we will actually have to plan strategically and budget accordingly. So with that, I'm supporting 100% the mayor's motion. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Bryant. Okay, I've got Commissioner Minor and Commissioner Lindley. Commissioner Minor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I support the $1 million for nonprofits. I think that's a good move. One thing I feel very strongly about, and I pushed for this at the last meeting, was the tiered structure based on employees. I felt then regarding with the private sector, and I feel the same way now with the nonprofit sector. A flat rate going to a nonprofit that has a budget of $60,000 per year is not a good use of dollars, taxpayer dollars, when a nonprofit has a $2 million budget is getting the same amount. I feel very strongly, I think we need to maximize the benefit of this taxpayer dollar nonprofit cedar program by tiering the structure so that that way larger nonprofits that have a bigger budget, that have more employees, are able to use more money. If we had a flat rate for every nonprofit, you're not utilizing those dollars most effectively. Smaller nonprofits with 1 or 2 employees are going to get the same amount as the larger nonprofits. For us, it's always been about keeping nonprofits and businesses in business and helping them keep employees on the payroll. And so I really feel strongly about the tiered approach. Mayor Daley, would you accept another friendly amendment to adhere the nonprofit program to CEDAR's tiers?
Mayor Daley, in your court.
Yeah, it just takes a second to pull everything back online when you mute the camera and mute the microphone. Sorry about that. Commissioner Minor, I hear what you're saying. I would like to hear more from our colleagues. My goal is to streamline this process so that we can get assistance in the hands of nonprofits as quickly as possible. Ben, you and Christina are the ones that are going to have to administrate this. Where are the pitfalls from the business community to the nonprofit community? How is this going to impact your ability to, I don't know, I'm just asking. What are your thoughts on Commissioner Minor's comments?
Well, Commissioner, Mr. Mayor, we have success of doing exactly what Commissioner Minor was talking about, what you all voted for the last time. We can do it tiered, no problem. We can achieve everything that we've talked about previously and laid out here today. What we needed to know is the general terms of what you wanted, where you wanted it to come from, and we gave you options and you provided that, thank you. And then if you want to tier it or not tier it, that's fine. It makes sense. So if you align this as you have pretty much with your CEDAR program outline, we already have the infrastructure administratively in place. The only thing you're really changing is instead of a for-profit, it's a nonprofit, which I do want to make sure I understand, is that a 501c3 or just a broader definition? But pause that for a moment. But yeah, that's all we need to know.
I know, and here's the other difference, Commissioner Minor, that I'm trying to work with, is that it's also a different structure than from a business. You might have a small nonprofit that only has 2 or 3 employees, but actually has a pretty large operations because they depend so much on the volunteer workforce as well.
Right.
And be able to maximize their contributions in a different way versus just based on employees. I don't know. I don't work in the nonprofit community, so I'm looking for assistance and guidance from you and from everybody.
Mr. Chair, on point.
Yeah, but let me weigh in real quick first. I tend to agree with Commissioner Minor. If we're going to do this, we do it tiered. I think we're going to talk ourselves in circles trying to make it perfect. I think the last time we put a framework in place, it worked relatively well. Clearly, there were some people that come out, like the example you just gave, Mayor Daley, but I would argue that it's a process, and most of them would benefit from the process, would be mine. But I don't want to overcome. Commissioner Williams-Cox, you have a question?
Well, yeah, I really wish we would just go ahead and finish the mayor's motion and then come back and do this other piece, which is what we did last time, so that we can, as the children say, we can secure the bag with the $1 million, and then we can come back and talk about how to do it. But we got to be careful with nonprofits. First of all, every nonprofit is not a 501c3. They may be a local not-for-profit as they're registered with the Secretary of State, so keep that in mind. And the other thing is that they are limited in their administrative costs that businesses were not limited in. So when we don't want to look at a tier process like we did with the businesses, because it's going to be different. So if you follow what I'm saying, I'm ready for the question. I haven't called it because I know that there were people in the queue, but we're taking too long to land this plane.
Well, I need to say one more thing on this, Mr. Mayor, before we vote on this thing, and that's the equity issue, Mr. Mayor. And I believe that our staff should be charged to know that we can't have our Black nonprofits getting teeny weeny amounts of money and the majority of the amount would, however, it's tiered, structured, qualified, criteria, whatever you want to call it. Pro-Black folk criteria ought to be accessible. This should not be apply for one loan in order to get this loan, all of that. We need to cut the red tape and allow folk to get to access this capital. And I'm mindful, and I don't want to see a report come back here that has the kind of lopsided $5,000, $2,500, $1,200 tiered situation. Ben, we asking you to make that thing and write some criteria that this thing is going to be much fair with respect to the sums of money that were distributed per rata share of those who were asking. Thank you.
All right, so Mayor, still in your court. Commissioner Minor asked the question, would you accept that amendment for having a tiered basis? I would offer that you've got enough information in front of them. If we sit here and try and figure out every angle, if it follows to the old one, that we've got a framework, but I'm not trying to, that's my opinion. So it's your call, Mr. Mayor, if you'll accept that amendment.
Commissioner Minor, I know your heart's in it. I think I'm going to stick with my original motion. You won't hurt my feelings if you want to make a substitute, and it sounds like the chairman would second it for a tier. But I just think there's too many pitfalls creating a tier system in the nonprofit community. I cannot believe I'm about to say this, but I agree with Commissioner Proctor. And I think
no wonder there's a pandemic.
I think we need to keep it clean. So I'm going to stick with the original motion, but I do appreciate the suggestions in the conversation. Rick.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Ask a question on: is there an amount you got? If yours is if it's not tiered, what's the amount per?
Right.
Mr. Mayor.
I'm keeping in mind that there are 2,000 not-for-profits in the community.
Right.
2,400.
What is
right.
it?
Right.
I will definitely defer to staff and the conversation of what we can set it at. I also understand, and let me be very clear, this is not the end-all be-all, and I understand that we're not going to be able to help every single not-for-profit out there. Much like the business community, it was based on who can fill out their applications and get submitted. Our goal is to do everything we possibly can. Look, if we do $2,500 baseline, that's 400 nonprofits. You can lower the amount from there to help more nonprofits, but I am going into this eyes wide open, realizing that we're not going to be able to provide assistance to every single nonprofit, nor did we go into CEDAR thinking that we're going to be able to provide assistance to every single business. I think it also depends on those nonprofits that can show need, just like, and that's going to be the next conversation that Commissioner Williams-Cox has suggested, what exactly does the program look like? Obviously, there are nonprofits that have suffered a lot more than others, and I think all that will be taken into consideration as well as part of the qualifying process.
Call the question.
I've got the question called. I'll second that. Let's vote on calling the question. I need a or nay, yes or no on calling the question. All in favor, let me do a roll call because, yeah, this will get too messy. John Daly, calling the question.
Aye.
Yay or nay?
He said yes.
Okay, Elaine. Commissioner Bryant.
Yes.
Commissioner Matlow.
Yes.
Commissioner Richardson.
Yes.
Commissioner Williams-Cox.
Yes.
I'm yes. Commissioner Proctor.
Yes.
Commissioner Jackson.
Yes.
Commissioner Minor.
No.
Commissioner Dozier.
Never.
I'm sorry, what?
No.
Okay, sorry. Commissioner Lindley.
Yes.
Commissioner Maddox. Oh, he recused. Okay, so he may not be. Okay, so clearly the question was called the way I got it. I've got two. Yeah, it passes. So now we vote on the motion that is on the table, which is.
Who has the voting sheet?
I can use that one. I can see. You want to vote? Okay. All right. So the motion on the table, and Commissioner Mayor Daley, don't let me. The way I understand it, $1 million to be used for nonprofits with a non-seat approach, which is basically, and we're leaving discretion to staff on what that magic number will be, or is that the way I understood this?
Yeah, if I could just clarify one thing that I need to do, Mr. Mayor. So it's $1 million. I need to clarify where it's coming from. So I'm saying 500,000 from Lake Lafayette, 500,000 from Monroe Adams Corridor Placemaking. I had mistakenly said that we could have flexibility there in that part. Not. So that would be where it would come from. Broadly defined nonprofit, and you're giving deference to staff to set the amount of the grant.
I would, Mr. Chair.
I understand it, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, it's a question on process.
Yeah, question on what was just stated. And I want to make sure I understand. And I want to be clear that the $1 million that motion has been approved. We got that. The area where
not yet.
Question has been approved.
That was a call.
Oh, that was just a call to question. Okay.
Yeah,
okay. Thank you. I'm glad I asked.
So we want to clarify the motion.
Voted yet.
And now I'm going to vote on the motion. Okay.
Question, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Ben said that the definition of not-for-profit would be broadly defined. I want to see that an organization has some kind of paperwork demonstrating that they are a not-for-profit organization. Now, because there are lots of people out there who say they're not-for-profit, and they have no paperwork to demonstrate that, either registration with a local agency or the state. And again, I really believe that's going to cause us a problem if we don't have that.
And you want to press it?
Thank you, Commissioner, Mr. Chairman. No, they would have to be a nonprofit as federally defined. What I meant was, does not just have to be 501c3. There's other categories. They would have to be a federally defined nonprofit.
Okay.
Okay, that gives me some comfort.
We're voting on the motion. This is a roll call vote again. Okay. Mayor Daley.
Yes.
Mayor Daley, on your motion.
Yes. Can you hear me? Yes.
Yes, I assume so. Commissioner Bryant.
Yes.
Is that yes? I'm sorry.
Yes.
Okay. Commissioner Matlow.
Yes.
Commissioner Richardson.
Yes.
Commissioner Williams-Cox.
Yes.
Commissioner Proctor.
Sir.
Commissioner Jackson.
Yes.
Commissioner Minor.
No, for the reasons I stated.
Commissioner Dozier.
Yes.
Commissioner Lindley.
Yes.
Commissioner Maddox recuses himself. I, in the spirit of this, will vote for it. Commissioner Minor, I'll give you the option if you'd like to reconsider so we can make this unanimous just for the public's your call.
I feel it's irresponsible, so I'm voting no.
Okay. All right. I see the motion carries pretty clearly from my perspective. Pardon me.
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chair.
Now that you've taken the
go ahead.
The vote. Can I ask a question real quick?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
Because we are building a program by virtual discussion here. We didn't have this fleshed out before. I think the question that Commissioner Richardson just asked, and thank you, Commissioner Richardson, sorry, for jumping in and asking that question even after the question had been called. That was critical piece, because we don't need to leave any confusion about whether or not you have to be a federal nonprofit or not to access the program. I'm concerned there's other questions right now about this program. I'm hearing a lot of chatter, Mr. Chair. Can you still hear me?
I can, yes, but somebody needs to mute their phone.
Okay.
Commissioner Proctor, thank you. Yeah.
All right. My feeling is there's a lot of different types of nonprofits, like you just said, Ben. Do associations qualify for this? I suppose so from what you just said, and I think that may be fine, but I was reluctant to support it because there's a lot of unknown factors here. And I don't want anyone walking away from this meeting thinking they qualify for something because we just haven't dug into those details. So,
all right, let's get, great point, Commissioner Dozier.
Yeah. Mr. Chair, on point.
Yeah, let us have an open
Can I get a
quick? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I agree with you. Can we get a question from staff about that, please?
Yeah, they're all different kinds of nonprofits. So I appreciate the confidence in staff to make these determinations. However, you have professional associations that could qualify. You have certain churches that potentially could qualify. You have traditional 501c3s that could qualify. We need to know the policy direction of this body. We will be quick to respond and project as you desire, but is it human services nonprofits that is the desire, and would be one question that would help clarify.
Mr. Chair.
Yeah, go ahead, Commissioner. You still got the floor. Yeah.
Just muted me. Okay, I'm back. Thank you. Ben, you're getting to the heart of what I was concerned about. We did not give you enough structure in this motion to do this. And if we need a second motion on this, I don't know how we unwind or how we rectify this situation. I have a tremendous amount of concern for what's happening for our churches right now. There are staff, there's a lot of different impacts there. But I feel like we may need to draw a line at some point here, and I'm using them as an example. Statewide associations, I have a lot of concern about, their workers, their local residents, but again, I'm not sure that they have the biggest impact on our local community that could really help preserve jobs, and as we've all talked about, what the nonprofits give back to our community. On the other hand, I would say our arts and cultural and historic organizations, what COCA's been doing to help support those folks, retool their businesses, provide online access, other things like that, the struggles they're having. I personally would like to see those organizations qualify. They do employ a lot of people. They contribute a lot of sales tax, a lot of other things to our community. So we need more direction on how to unpack this. I don't know where the lines are, and we haven't had this conversation as a board as to what we want to see. So we just approved a big pot of money. Now what do we do? Is that the only question you need answered, or are there other questions?
There's going to be a lot of questions, I think.
Okay. Let me
go ahead.
Let me say, if there was a motion to be made that it was local, I don't know if it's 501c3s or organizations that qualify. I don't know how to draw those lines, but I would like to make a motion to draw some lines. I'll put it that way. I need some guidance from staff. So what do you all recommend? Have you looked at this?
Yeah. Commissioners, again, to the mayor and commissioners, all we want is clarification in terms of what, I think there's only a handful of issues here, but the big ones, in terms of what you want this program to do. For example, we've heard you on the tier, that's off the table. You know what the amount is. We just generally need to know what types of nonprofits you're targeting. Is there a classification or not? And if you don't want, for example, them to have to apply for federal relief, I need to know that. If you just want them to do the affidavit that says that they've lost 50% of revenue, that's fine. But that would be a clarification point. These are all reading from the list of the limited requirements of the successful CEDAR program. I just need
Ben, my question, and I see a lot of other hands going up here. Everything else on the list looks good to me. I'm asking you, where are those lines with the nonprofits? Did you all look at that before? But if you don't have an answer, perhaps some of the others have some opinions.
I've got a couple of people that I'm going to jump in that have been asking to speak, and they got cut off, so I want to give them a chance. I've got Minor, Lindley, Williams, Cox. I saw the mayor with his hand up. So why don't we I'll keep working through the list because I can't have it turn into free roll. I apologize. Commissioner Minor, you want to weigh back in? Commissioner Minor?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I agree with Commissioner Dozier. I think we've got to be pretty precise about what a nonprofit is we want to support and have some very clear delineations on what that means. I think casting a wide net is helpful, but we've also got to make sure that they're a true nonprofit. So I think we've got to tread very carefully on this. I know we're here. It's a long day, but we're here for a reason. We're here to get this right as quickly as we can. So as long as it takes, I think it's important for us to hash this out.
All right. I've got Commissioner Lindley, Commissioner Williams, Cox, the mayor. Let me weigh in real quick. I think there was a comment that Commissioner Dozier made relative to religious institutions. I think we are forbidden. Yeah, so that can't be a consideration. And then one of the discussions.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes.
Yeah, one of the discussions ought to be, you brought up the cultural side. Is it human services and culture, or one or the other? And clearly, I would yield to Ben. There's a check of charity type of thing where you can actually determine, are they a valid organization? I could start a nonprofit this afternoon, and I could show up on the doorstep. Now, granted, I'd have to dance through some other holes, but we got to be careful, make it too wide. I've got Commissioner Lindley. You're up next.
Thank you. I definitely think the statewide association should not be included in this.
Okay.
I mean, even though some of them are well-meaning, I know. I regret that Commissioner Minor's tiering system didn't work, because I think that would have helped us quite a bit in terms of just knowing who would be eligible. But having gone past that, so no to churches, no to statewide associations, no to GoFundMe, right? I mean, it seems like...
My kids' college education.
I mean, it seems like we know the cultural community, it's nonprofit, but it's a big part of enriching our community, and they hire a lot of people, and a lot of jobs are at stake in those communities too. To me, the two big ones would be no to churches and no to statewide associations, and the otherwise would be the ones that are federally qualified nonprofits, and that would include cultural, historic, and as well as the human services one. I mean, maybe if we just specify human services, cultural, and historic.
All right, local. So you want to make that in the form of a motion? So
I'll make that in a motion, and local, not statewide, and not statewide associations, and no churches. I mean, would that narrow it down enough?
Thank you, guys.
Yes.
I'd like to go deeper to narrow it even further.
Commissioner Lindley, did you say arts as well?
Yes,
I said arts.
In there.
Yeah, okay,
Cultural and
thank you.
historic arts. Yeah.
Arts and historical, yeah.
And historical, because that's the.
So no to churches, obviously.
No to churches and no to statewide associations.
Okay.
Arts, cultural, historic, human services.
Is there a second?
Pardon me?
Is there a second? I'm looking for a second.
Do I hear a second?
How about social services?
Second.
That's human services, isn't it? Social service, human services.
Who seconded that?
Yeah.
Kristen.
You could do social/human services.
Okay, thanks. All right,
Kristen seconded it.
Okay, we have a motion, we have a second. Are you done, Commissioner Lindley?
I'm done.
Okay, thanks. I've got Williams, Cox, Mayor Daley, and Commissioner Proctor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Can you state the motion, please?
The motion, as I understand it, is a clarifying motion on the prior one, which basically gives us some guidelines. It's health and human services, no churches, no statewide associations, and cultural organizations. Is that a fair assessment, Commissioner Lindley?
Yes, and I wonder if we want to say no to foundations such as, I hate to say it, just as an example, the Hospital Foundation or TCC Foundation, or, I think those are separate.
Got to be a service provider.
Uh-huh.
In those cases, those are not service providers.
Those are just fundraisers.
It could be a recipient, but they're not a service provider. So
I think that's good. Service providers, service.
does that make sense, Ben?
Yeah, I have, when defining a nonprofit, it is no to churches, statewide associations, and foundations. Yes to those that are federally qualified, local, nonprofit designated within arts, cultural, historical, human, social services.
I'm good with that.
Okay.
Is that good with you, Christian? Commissioner Dozier?
Yeah, Commissioner Dozier, you're the second.
Seconded it.
I think what Ben just said may have answered my question, but when you said services, Mr. Chair, that may draw some lines within the arts, culture, and heritage group. I mean, do we?
I'm trying to be clear that it's the foundation piece where they're just.
Yes, yeah. I just wanted to make sure that wasn't going to muddy us, but yes, I think I'm okay with.
Yeah, Lemoyne teaches kids cultural things, so there's a providing services in that.
I think the arts and education, the ballet, Lemoyne, others,
They
there's a good
deliver
amount there.
service or events or,
All right,
Yeah.
we've got.
Okay, good, thank you.
Yeah, I've got Commissioner Williams, Cox, the mayor, and Commissioner Proctor. Thank you all for your patience.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have two quick things. I think that what kind of muddied the water a little bit is that the motion, as I understand it, the mayor's motion did not specify the type of nonprofit. I know being mentioned in his clarification, but we have local not-for-profits that don't file with the federal to become a 501c3 because that is expensive. So I think we need to look at what the registration is in SunBiz or not-for-profits that may not be a 501c3, 7, or whatever the other 501cs are, local not-for-profits.
They have to have some kind of governmental tie. It's SunBiz or it's the federal government.
SunBiz would be appropriate. So I'm glad you said that. SunBiz would be appropriate because that's where you can do a not-for-profit, but you don't have to do a 501c3 application to be considered that. The other thing is, I think we need to focus on human services. I know we got $1 million. We want to be able to give a set amount that's meaningful, but if we focus on those organizations who are trying to help people get through this period of time, it helps us not have a laundry list of no's, but just to say we're going to focus on human services. So I'm glad when you mentioned services, that kind of hone that in a little bit more. We need to focus on those organizations that are trying to sustain life.
Yeah.
I appreciate the arts. I appreciate culture. If it can be proven that they're doing some things that's going to help sustain life, then okay. But really, our human services organizations are the ones that we're really leaning on to get us through.
Commissioner Lindley, you made the motion. You want to clarify that?
No, I mean, I understand your sympathy and your empathy in that response, but I think that's asking too much of staff to drill down and say exactly how do you define what you do in human services. I want us to stick with where we are. A lot of the nonprofits who contribute to the quality of life, they're not life-saving, but they're quality of life programs that they hire people. They provide services, and I don't want us to drill down that deeply. I think we're good with the list that I have. So respectfully, Commissioner Williams-Cox, I would say no to being that specific.
I appreciate that, Commissioner Lindley. I hope you'll understand I will not be able to support this motion.
Okay.
I want more money to go to people who are sustaining life. So I know, but that's where I accept your reason. Please accept mine.
Okay. Okay, we've got the mayor, Commissioner Proctor, Commissioner Matlow. Mr. Mayor.
I love this process. This is what it's all about. We would have figured it out already, Mr. Chairman. So I'll support the motion on the table. Although, let me just say for the record some hesitations that I do have, Mary Ann. Again, I'll support the motion, but I do think that there's something to be considered with Commissioner Williams-Cox and what she's saying with human services. I'm getting text messages from people out and about in the community that's watching this saying human services is where it is. I agree with you on state associations. I agree with you on some of the other sectors that I don't think is what we're looking for. I'm very hesitant about churches, and let me tell you why. I understand completely what we're talking about in regards to, actual churches themselves. Although it should be noted for the record that the government has changed the rules and is allowing churches all across the country to actually apply for the Paycheck Protection Program. So that rule during emergency time has been lifted when it comes into the constitutional question that was brought up. And in fact, the city attorney prepared a memo for the city commissioners in regards to, and I'll just read from her memo, the City of Tallahassee may provide payment to religious affiliated organizations for social services when the program does not promote the religion of the organization, when the social service is not significantly sectarian in nature and does not involve religious indoctrination or require participation in religious ritual. Let me give you an example. By the way, great job last night on the $300,000 that the county is allocating specifically for the good work that y'all are doing at the EOC with homelessness, which we have matched you $300,000. Let me remind you that one of the organizations we will be working with specifically is the Salvation Army, which is a religious organization, which some would argue is a religious organization, but yet we're not supporting the church. We are supporting their mission. Bethel Ready to Work, which is an incredible program that the church runs for re-entry, some would consider is a religious organization because of the church. I don't know how to draw this line, but I think we need to be careful just drawing a hard stop with anything that has a religion associated with it. And Commissioner Lindley, again, I'm going to support the motion on the table, even though what I just reflected is not in the motion, but I did feel compelled to put that out there on the record as well.
Thank you, Mr.
Chair,
Mayor.
on point real quick.
Yes, Commissioner Lindley, or who's that, Commissioner?
Some of those programs that the mayor just articulated, I thought perhaps Catholic Charity, others, I'm not looking at a CHSP list, but those programs run by religious organizations sometimes do qualify for CHSP or other dollars like a 501c3.
Yeah.
But they would have structured that program to qualify for those dollars outside of the religious institution itself. Is that correct? County Administrator may know this, or Susan, I'm not sure, but.
I think you're probably right. They're a separate entity like Catholic Charities. My bet is it's a separate 501c3 that is funded by the Catholic Church primarily.
I think we should unpack that. I think the mayor made a good point, but.
Let me let the county attorney wait.
Thank you. Thank you.
That's okay. Just to clarify, in terms of the programs that the mayor just mentioned, there's been an exception recognized by Florida state courts that if there is a contract for services with a religious organization, that is not a violation of the Constitution. As long as that organization is providing services, human services through a contract, that's fine. There's no prohibition against that. The prohibition is direct aid to a religious institution. And that was the clarification that needed to be made, I think, in the last meeting, that we didn't really have time to go through so that everybody's on the same page as to what's allowed.
So that would be allowable. I mean,
yes,
what the mayor said would be, so that would be fine.
And for direct services provided by that church, they're actually providing, services. There's a statement of work. There's no different from what they're providing in terms of other organizations. That's fine. There's no prohibition against that. The courts in Florida have recognized that distinction. You cannot provide direct aid to a religious institution.
Okay. I think that Ben, does that give you all enough direction as far as?
Yes.
I think, okay. I think the intent was not to be giving it to a church.
A church, a temple, a mosque, maybe.
Right. But if that church is in fact providing human service as a side.
Yeah, if they're running a child care center, is that what we're talking
or
about?
See, they're Catholic charities. They're feeding the homeless, feeding hungry people.
And they fit the other criteria.
Right, there's a contract services.
Right, there's a contract for services. Okay. I've got Commissioner Proctor and then Commissioner Matlow.
Thank you, Chairman. Can you hear me, Chairman?
Yes, sir, we can.
Good. I just define a church entity that I think that along the lines of what y'all talking about, Ben, is that any kind of entity that is so heavily focused that they don't do no earthly good, we ain't giving no money to them. No money. I think that also over the years, the United Way and the United Partners and the bigs of the 501 tradition have dominated in this element of receiving public dollars. I am looking for some of the less traditionals, some of the less silk stocking type entities, and what has been a previous point of consternation for many of the smaller who don't quite make it to the UPS consideration is paperwork, the computer submission, and having all the upper tiered fancy stuff, and they may not have consultants to help them get their paperwork and all of that. And so I'm hopeful that the categories would not just look at which of these entities had a consultant to put the right cover sheet and all the right icons on the front of the sheet of paper to say that they were this. So it don't have to be a direct list coming from the United Way to be a precise shadow of the United Partners. This should really welcome people who previously have been left out and disengaged from our process. So those are my hopes, that we will have something that is not, the bar is so high and classy that regular old folk who are trying to help other folk can't get in. And that's the idea. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Proctor. I've got Commissioner Matlow next, and then Commissioner Richardson. And then after that, I'm going to go ahead and take a roll call vote. That's all right, unless I have a violent objection. Commissioner Matlow.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I also agree with Commissioner Proctor. I think what was mentioned earlier, if they were registered on Sunbiz and could be identified as a nonprofit providing one of those services, I think that's the direction we're going in. I also express support of the arts and culture community. I know we have theaters and performance halls in our community that have to shut down because they couldn't have gatherings and have lost entire seasons. Also having to lay off staff and that sort of thing, and having the same sort of challenges our local small businesses have. So I appreciate the motion and fully support it.
All right, I have Commissioner Bryant, Commissioner Richardson, then Commissioner Dozier, and then that's it, okay? Commissioner Bryant.
I'll pass, thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Richardson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I wanted to bring to everyone's attention the same issue that Commissioner Bryant and I think Commissioner Bryant, you were on this issue last time. Because if it's going to be first come, first served, we need to make sure that the information gets out, and those that aren't listening to this broadcast or may hear it on WCOT aren't the first in line, and then all the money is gone before some of the smaller ones who may not get the information as quickly are able to apply. So I just want to put that out there for us to consider.
Thank you, Commissioner Richardson. Commissioner Dozier.
Mr. Chair, I actually had forgotten to take my hand down there, but I want to make one last clarification, because we've had some confusion after our last meeting about what was in the motion and what wasn't. So Sunbiz, anyone who's registered at the state but not federally, that is a whole different scenario. This is only about federally. The motion only includes those who are registered with the federal government. Is that correct?
think the idea was that, go ahead, Ben.
So let me restate what I got.
Thank you.
Definition of nonprofit will not include churches directly. However, those that perform a service could qualify. No to statewide associations, no to foundations. Yes to federally designated, or we'll look into the SunBiz designation is what I have. Arts, cultural, historical, human, social services. Properly governmentally designated nonprofits. That's my notes. So
okay, I agree with all of that. I understand the concern about those that may not be federally qualified, but maybe under the SunBiz, but it is, I can't get there with that kind of vagueness right now. You'll look into it and everything else. I want all of us, the board, to be on the same page, whether we agree or not. I think it should stay with federal. That's my opinion. That's how we track nonprofits nationwide. That's who qualifies for other types of grants. So respectfully, I just have a concern about that piece. Everything else sounds great. Thank you.
All right. I'm going to go ahead and do a roll call vote. I don't see anybody else with their hand up right now. Did I miss anybody? Okay. From the city side, Mayor Daley, you heard the motion. Well, does everybody understand what's on the floor? It's Commissioner Lindley's motion. That's now.
Kristen, you seconded it. Are you withdrawing your second?
No, I seconded Commissioner Lindley, but I'm just saying that it does. I don't know if SunBiz is how anybody qualifies nonprofits for grants. And I'm having a hard time getting there with that. So, and you needed specific directions.
Okay, well, you can vote against the motion you seconded, so that's just the question. I was just concerned that
That's what I'm concerned. If you want to vote against this and you're the second, and we need another second, I would think. But
Commissioner Lindley, Mr. Chair, my point is, Ben just said in his list, you will look into SunBiz.
Yes.
That's not specifics. So what are you going to look in? What's going to make that judgment? That's all I was looking for.
Ben, what we're looking for is just whatever the state certification. There is a state certification for not-for-profits.
Right.
I've had one. So there is a
Would those people qualify for CHSP?
Yes.
They qualify for CHSP?
Yeah. I don't see why they would not. Not for profit. For profit is a designation that SunBiz allows for.
No, there are different types of nonprofits.
I do know that there's different types. There are different types. There are federal types and there are local types. And I think what we're trying to do is we're trying to make sure that those who have not paid the fee to become a 501c3, because that's a barrier, that they too be considered for this assistance. And if they can provide from SunBiz a statement, a printout that shows that they are a registered not-for-profit organization, they should be included.
Florida, yes.
For the state of Florida, they should be included.
Okay, all right.
Okay, let's vote on this.
Thank you, Commissioner Lindley. Okay, let's go. Mayor Daley, yes or no on the clarifying motion as stated?
Yes.
Okay, Commissioner Bryant?
Yes.
Commissioner Matlow?
Yes.
Commissioner Matlow?
Yes.
Thank you. Commissioner Richardson?
Yes.
Commissioner Diane Williams-Scott?
I will support this, even though I said I would not. I do still believe, let me for the record state, we should focus on human services.
Well, point well taken. Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Proctor?
Sir, my chairman.
Commissioner Jackson, thank you.
From Commissioner Jackson.
Yes. Commissioner Minor?
Yes.
Commissioner Dozier?
Yes.
Commissioner Lindley,
Yes.
Commissioner Maddox recuses himself, and I'm yes too. Looks like it's unanimous by my count. Ben, okay. All right. Thank you for your discussion and thank you for your clarification. And where are we in the agenda? What's up next? Where are we?
Okay, so you've now acted on item number 2, 2 different motions. Next item, commissioners, is item number 3, which is acceptance of the status report on COVID-19, basically the CEDAR grants. I will note that the recommendation includes covering the overages that we paid for $18,500, as is outlined in the item. We've talked about this a lot. We're here to answer any questions that you may have. Staff recommendation is option number 1 for this successful program.
That's it? We need a motion to accept that?
You need a motion.
I'd entertain a motion to accept the status report.
Move option.
So moved.
Mr. Chairman.
We have a motion from Commissioner Richardson and a second from
Dozier.
Commissioner Dozier. Okay. Any discussion?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I can't get my video on, but for the sake of clarity, real quick, this is the mayor. Commissioner Richardson, would you be interested in amending your motion to our conversation that we had earlier, putting $100,000 into the CEDAR program and extending it until the amount runs out? Based on the previous conversation?
You're muted.
You're muted, Mr. Commissioner Richardson. Commissioner Richardson, you're muted.
Yeah.
Thank you. I'm sorry. I hesitated, Mr. Mayor, because I think with that you're going to open a can of worms, much like what we've seen with the CHSP portal being opened for those additional days, and so I would prefer that it be a separate motion because I'm just not sure that I'm there yet.
Understand.
I think Commissioner Richardson's spot on. Okay, so we've got a motion and we got a second. Any other discussion? Mr. Mayor, you want other comments on that?
No, sir. I'll support Commissioner Richardson's motion, and then for the sake of closing out the meeting, I'll make a motion after he is done.
Okay, all right. Any other discussion on the motion to accept the report as Ben has presented it? All right. Do I need another roll call vote?
No.
All in favor signify by saying aye, and if I can see you, raise your hand.
Aye.
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 Any opposition? All right. Done. Commissioner Daly, Mayor Daly, pardon me. You wanted to make a motion?
Yeah, you know what, though? I'm not going to put everybody on the spot. Can you, Brian, I don't know how you do this. Can you just look at thumbs up or thumbs down? Before we go on the record, is there an appetite to have this conversation about an additional 100,000 into CEDAR?
Mr. Chair, Mr. Mayor, I do have that appetite. I'm wondering if you would consider any of the relaxed stipulations I put forth earlier for minority business.
Commissioner Maddox, I would have a hard time with that just because then we're changing the rules of the game. I think that if we maintain the exact same rules of the game, the only thing we're doing is putting more money into the funding so that businesses that meet the same requirements as the previous, so that we're not changing the rules. So that way it is different from what we all just experienced with CHSP because I'm not going down that rabbit hole. I just think that at this time, if we could put additional fund, look, if nobody applies, nobody applies, and the money's not spent. It's just an idea, but I don't want to put everybody on the spot with a formal vote if there's not an appetite.
Okay, so there's no motion there, if I understood you right. Mr. Mayor?
Correct. I'm not gonna force the hand if it goes down because I don't want to put everybody in an awkward position. But I would support putting an additional 100,000 in for the CEDAR program.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Commissioner.
I would second that motion, but I would like to also ask, is there more than 100 available?
I'll weigh in. We've got $1 million we've pulled out on top of a $3.7 million shortfall, and I think every dollar beyond that burns us further down the road.
Well, I can appreciate that, but let's remember where it came from, and right now these folks need help.
It hasn't come yet, but we're borrowing.
Well, it's gonna come. But the other part of that, I like to ask is, I asked this question earlier, and I don't remember getting a clear answer. Was we required them to file for SBA assistance and some other disaster assistance. Are those options still available, or is that window for applying closed? Because if it's closed, then the rules are not the same anymore. If they can't apply.
Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, it's still available to them. And there could be businesses out there, as I had stated before, that have applied for the emergency bridge loan. I believe that's what Christina mentioned earlier today, that is since closed. But there are people that have proof of that could apply for the CEDAR grant that have not yet applied for CEDAR grant.
Okay.
So it's still a valid requisite, and it's not the only requisite.
Okay. I just wanted to be sure. But for lack of an appetite to do any more, I will support the mayor's motion for 100,000.
All right, Mr. Mayor, you want to go through with this on a vote? Because we have a motion in a second.
Sure.
Okay, everybody understand what the motion is? All right.
Restate it just in case.
It's if I understand correctly, it is opening up the CEDAR process again, which has run out, for another $100,000 until that money runs out.
To be taken from OEB.
Right.
The available funds in OEB. Yes.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir. Commissioner.
Thank you. I want to just express to the mayor, I understand where he's coming from. I think we did an all-out blitz to get information out to the business community. I don't know how much more marketed it could have been. I'm sorry that there were people who maybe didn't get the word or for whatever reason didn't apply. But I'm telling you, if you open this portal again, we're going to be creating a problem for ourselves, just like we saw with CHSP. If I was going to do an extra 100,000, I would put that into the not-for-profits. And so that's my position on it. It's not that I don't support those additional businesses, but I just think we're creating a problem for ourselves by opening up this portal again.
Okay. All right, let's vote. Commissioner Daley, your motion, I assume yes.
Yes.
Commissioner Daley, Mayor Daley, pardon me.
He said yes.
Okay, Commissioner Bryant.
Yes.
Is that a yes?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Commissioner Matlow.
Yes.
Commissioner Richardson.
No.
Thank you. Commissioner Williams-Cox.
Yes.
I can't.
Commissioner Williams-Cox?
Yes.
Okay. I'm against for all the same reasons Commissioner Richardson gave. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, but I can't get there. Commissioner Proctor?
No.
Is that no?
No.
No. Commissioner Jackson?
Nay, with great respect to the intent of the mayor.
I agree.
Nay.
Okay, Commissioner Minor? Commissioner Minor? Commissioner Minor?
Yes, did you hear me?
I can now, yeah. Your vote, yes or no on the vote?
Yes.
Yes. Commissioner Dozier?
No.
Commissioner Lindley?
No.
Commissioner Maddox? Oh, he recused himself. Well, no, he can on this one. Commissioner Maddox?
No.
I say yes, but like it fell at the county level anyway, but yes.
My count, it failed because it's the 5 of us at the county were against it. So, all right. I would offer that we wind this down. I think we've done 4 hours of what I would consider pretty intense work. Let me just say, I appreciate all the input. I have to tell you, I personally wouldn't have gotten to the nonprofit piece, but I appreciate everybody doing this. And I value the opinions that everybody put out there, and I want to show some kind of unified front for us as elected bodies in our groups, in our community. I know that OEB has got a ton of work on their shoulders now, and I think that was a good motion, Commissioner Lindley, to go through and clarify that, because I think, the mayor teed it up, but at least we gave some framework. And I appreciate everybody's input. I appreciate everybody's time. These are tough times. We have another scheduled meeting, I guess, in May right now. And we will all be talking with our independent bodies. So thank you all for your time today. This was a tense meeting, a tough meeting, a productive meeting. And I can't say how proud I am to be part of this community, watching how people are stepping up. I mean, in all fairness, every aspect, the nonprofits, the faith-based community, the business community, the local governments, and this really shows what a community like ours is made out of. So it's an honor to be part of this community. With that, I'm going to call the meeting adjourned. Thank you all. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thanks.